Enigmatic glow. Why ancient beeswax outshone gold. You'll discover how a simple bee product held unimaginable worth in bygone eras. Hey guys, today we are stepping back, way back, beyond the polished gleam of gold coins and the soft rustle of silk, into a world where a humble, golden-hued substance, born from the tireless toil of tiny insects, held more sway, more power, and more sheer, undeniable value than all the glittering ingots you could ever imagine. Picture this. You're an artisan in ancient Egypt, your fingers sticky with the very material we're about to explore, shaping it into intricate figures under the flickering oil lamp. Or maybe you're a Roman senator, signing a decree not with ink, but pressing your seal into a warm, fragrant block. This isn't just about honey. This is about its lesser-known, yet far more potent sibling. You probably won't survive this journey into the buzzing, sometimes dangerous past, but hey, at least you'll smell sweet. You find yourself in an era long before central heating or even basic streetlights, where the sun's descent meant plunging into an oppressive, impenetrable darkness. Light, true, steady light, was a precious commodity, not just for seeing, but for extending the day, for working, for ritual. And here, beeswax emerged as the undeniable champion. Forget your flimsy tallow candles, smoking and sputtering like a disgruntled ghost. Beeswax burned with a clean, bright flame, a steady, unwavering beacon that smelled faintly of summer meadows, not rendered animal fat. It didn't just illuminate. It transformed the atmosphere, purifying the air, a silent, humble magic working in the corners of ancient homes and temples. Imagine the sheer luxury of a consistently lit space, a rare privilege, marking the homes of the wealthy and the sacred spaces of the gods. You could read, you could craft, you could even host a late-night toga party without everyone tripping over their sandals. Its value wasn't merely in its luminescence. Beeswax was, quite literally, the ancient world's Swiss Army knife. You needed a sealant, beeswax, a lubricant for a creaky cartwheel, beeswax, a waterproof coating for your fishing nets, beeswax, a base for your cosmetics, keeping your ancient Roman cheeks from cracking like dry earth. Absolutely beeswax. You could carve it, mold it, melt it, spread it. It was incredibly versatile, yet surprisingly durable. Think of the sheer ingenuity it took to transform something so ephemeral into something so foundational. And because it was so integral to daily life, from the sacred to the mundane, its demand was constant, creating a market that often outstripped the supply, pushing its price higher and higher. You might scoff, but it's just bug spit. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong, but that bug spit held kingdoms together. One mainstream historical fact that underscores its importance is its pivotal role in ancient Egyptian mummification. You might think of linen bandages and elaborate sarcophagi, but beeswax was crucial. It wasn't just for coating the linen strips to make them more pliable and adhere better. It was also used in the process of sealing the bodily cavities after organ removal, acting as a preservative and a barrier against decay. You can almost feel the dry, dusty air of the embalming chamber, the faint, sweet scent of beeswax mingling with the strong, aromatic spices. This wasn't some optional extra. It was a fundamental component, a silent guardian of eternity, without which the intricate art of preserving the dead might never have reached its renowned level of perfection. It highlights how deeply integrated beeswax was into the most profound and sacred practices of the time. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. Did you know that in some ancient cultures, beeswax was believed to possess mystical properties, even being used in ancient forms of witchcraft and curses? You'd fashion a small effigy, perhaps of your annoying neighbor, out of beeswax, and then melt it slowly over a fire, believing that as the wax figure dissolved, so too would your adversary's strength or influence wane. Talk about a fiery farewell. This wasn't just practical application. It was tapping into the very essence of transformation and dissolution. It's a testament to how deeply the material permeated not just the physical, but also the metaphysical realms of ancient belief. You can almost hear the soft sizzle of the melting wax as someone whispered ill wishes into the night. And here's an open scholarly debate phrase. Historians still argue whether the perceived spiritual purity of beeswax, derived from the seemingly virginal process of its creation by bees which, for a long time, were thought to reproduce without sexual intercourse, contributed significantly more to its exorbitant value in religious contexts than its purely practical applications. You see, the ancient world wasn't always about logic and efficiency. Symbolism played a huge role. Was it the clean burn, the sweet scent, or the perceived purity of its origin that made it the chosen fuel for temple lamps, the base for sacred ointments, and the material for votive offerings? You ponder this, perhaps, as you drift off, thinking about the quiet hum of a beehive, a tiny factory producing a treasure beyond gold. Its mystery was as much a part of its worth as its utility. You stand on the threshold of an ancient night, and it is a darkness you've never truly known. Not the powers out, grab a flashlight kind of dark, or even the familiar gloom of a moonless camping trip. No, this is a primal, all-consuming void where shadows twist into monstrous shapes born purely from your imagination. And the very air feels thick with unseen presences. You reach out blindly, and your fingers brush against nothing but the inky blackness that presses in on all sides, a tangible weight on your skin. There's no faint glow from a distant city skyline, no shimmering phone screen to pierce the oppressive gloom, not even the comforting artificial red numbers of a digital clock. This is the real deal, the kind of absolute darkness that would send most of us scrambling for the nearest panic button. Honestly, you'd probably trip over your own feet, fall down a forgotten well, and crack your head open within 5 minutes of stepping outside your door after sunset. Good luck with that survival instinct, you modern marvel. But then, a miracle. A soft, golden halo blooms in the oppressive black, pushing back the encroaching shadows with a gentle, steady confidence that feels almost benevolent. It's not the harsh glare of an LED, buzzing with artificiality, nor the frantic, sputtering dance of a cheap, paraffin candle that throws more shadow than light. This, my friend, is the serene, almost meditative glow of beeswax, and in a world where true darkness reigned supreme for nearly half of every day, it was nothing short of a profound revolution. Think about it. Before electricity, before gas lamps humming softly in the streets, before even refined kerosene brought a glimmer of mass-produced light, how did anyone see anything after sunset? You might conjure images of sputtering tallow lamps, those greasy, stinky little pots of rendered animal fat that filled cramped rooms with acrid smoke, and a wavering, unreliable light that seemed determined to give you a headache, trying to read a papyrus scroll by the flickering, greasy illumination of a tallow lamp. You'd be lucky to discern a single hieroglyph before your eyes watered and your lungs protested, perhaps even before you accidentally set your beard on fire. It was less about true illumination and more about, I can just about see enough not to walk into a wall. Probably. And then there were the crude pitch torches, roaring infernos that spat embers and soot with wild abandon, capable of setting your carefully thatched roof ablaze with a single errant spark if you dared bring them indoors. Practical, not so much. Beeswax, however, was in a league of its own, a testament to nature's quiet brilliance. Its flame burned with a steady, unwavering intensity, a beacon against the chaotic, frightening darkness. It produced significantly less smoke than animal fat or pitch, meaning your lungs wouldn't feel like you'd spent the evening in a medieval smokehouse filled with 1,000 disgruntled chimney sweeps. And that subtle, sweet, honeyed scent, a far cry from the rancid stink of burning fat or the acrid tang of pine resin. For the Romans and Greeks, particularly the wealthier classes who could afford such luxuries, beeswax candles weren't just a convenience. They were a profound statement, widely used to illuminate their grand villas, bustling public baths, and sacred temples. It was illumination you could breathe around, even enjoy, without constantly fanning away smoke or worrying about spontaneous combustion. This wasn't just light, it was an experience. You see, the magic wasn't just in the light itself, but in the quality of life it afforded, the quiet, almost overlooked revolution it sparked after the sun dipped below the horizon. Imagine for a moment trying to meticulously transcribe a sacred scroll, or intricately weave a tapestry with patterns as complex as a modern circuit board, all by the unreliable, eye-straining glow of a tallow lamp. It's an exercise in sheer, agonizing frustration and potential blindness, not to mention a serious fire hazard for your masterpiece. Beeswax, with its consistent, clean burn, provided the steady, reliable light absolutely necessary for fine craftwork that required precision, for late-night study of philosophical texts, or for simply sharing a peaceful meal and intimate conversation with loved ones without constantly squinting through a hazy veil of smoke. This bright, unwavering flame wasn't just a practical tool. It became a symbol of purity and reverence, often used in religious ceremonies across cultures, from the ancient Egyptians to early Christian churches, where its clean burn was seen as fitting for sacred spaces. This steady burn even led to some rather ingenious practical applications. In medieval monasteries, for instance, monks, ever resourceful, would sometimes mark beeswax candles at precise intervals along their length. As the candle slowly burned down, it served as a rudimentary but surprisingly effective form of timekeeping during long, silent night vigils, marking the passage of hours before the advent of accurate mechanical clocks. It was a silent, fragrant clock, ticking down the night with a gentle, golden glow, a testament to the ingenuity born of necessity. But here's the rub, the lingering question that keeps historians up at night, probably by the glow of a very modern desk lamp. Historians still argue whether the sheer cost and labor involved in producing enough beeswax for widespread domestic use limited its availability mostly to the wealthy, essentially making it a luxury for the elite, or if it was more accessible than we typically imagine, especially in areas with abundant wild bee populations, where wild hives could be more easily harvested. Either way, this wasn't just about turning on a light switch, as we might so casually say today. It was about extending the usable day, transforming cramped, often dark living spaces into havens of productivity, quiet contemplation, and even social interaction. This bright, clean flame, derived so laboriously from the industriousness of tiny, buzzing insects, wasn't merely a commodity. It was a luxury, a vital necessity, and a silent, glowing testament to why something as seemingly simple as beeswax could hold immeasurable value in a world perpetually yearning for just a little more light, a little more clarity, after the sun's comforting warmth had vanished. You stand in the hushed, cool embrace of an ancient tomb, the air thick with the dust of millennia and a faint, almost sweet, earthy scent that clings to your nostrils. Your breath catches, a little puff of vapor in the stillness. Around you, shadows stretch and writhe, cast by the single, stuttering flame of your torch, a feeble beacon against an eternity of darkness. The walls loom, alive with painted scenes of forgotten gods and grand processions, their colors still vibrant, impossibly so after thousands of years. You reach out, your fingertips hovering just inches from a finely carved wooden coffin, its surface smooth, polished to a muted gleam, even now. The intricate details, the delicate inlay, all preserved with an almost miraculous fidelity. You feel the weight of history pressing in, a tangible presence. And let's be honest, if this weren't a comforting narrative and you were actually here, without proper gear, a well-mapped exit, and at least a dozen highly trained Egyptologists to back you up, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes. Ancient tombs, while fascinating, were rarely built with your modern sensibilities for breathable air or non-collapsing ceilings in mind. But the very fact that such places, and the treasures within them, endure at all is a testament to the sheer ingenuity of our ancestors, and to the remarkable properties of humble beeswax. You see, the ancients knew, with a certainty that we often take for granted in our plastic-craft, climate-controlled world, that everything decays. Wood rots, papyrus crumbles, metals corrode. To defy this relentless march of time, to preserve not just objects but ideas, histories, and sacred beliefs, required something truly special. And beeswax, that golden gift from the hive, was their answer, their invisible guardian. Think about the pharaohs, those mighty rulers of Egypt, whose very existence was a constant battle against oblivion. When they passed into the afterlife, their bodies had to be preserved, not just for spiritual reasons, but as a physical anchor for their souls. Mummification was a complex, multi-stage process, and beeswax played an absolutely critical role. After the internal organs were removed and the body dehydrated with natron, the skin, often brittle and shrunken, needed restoration. Embalmers would meticulously apply a mixture of resins and, crucially, beeswax, warmed and blended to a pliable consistency. This protective coating not only helped to restore a more lifelike appearance, smoothing out wrinkles and filling in hollows, but also acted as a superb antibacterial and antifungal barrier. It sealed the pores, preventing further moisture loss, and more importantly, keeping out the microscopic agents of decay. It was like the world's first and most elaborate vacuum seal bag, designed to last for millennia. And frankly, considering some of the perfumes popular in ancient Egypt, this sealing action was probably a blessing for those involved in the burial rites, keeping things contained. Beyond the body itself, beeswax was employed to seal the various linen wrappings, ensuring they adhered tightly and provided an extra layer of protection. Canopic jars, holding the preserved organs, often had their stoppers sealed with beeswax to prevent contamination. And the lavish coffins and sarcophagi, they weren't just decorative, they were elaborate, airtight containers. Beeswax, often mixed with other resins or pigments, was used as a sealant along the joins and lids, preventing moisture, insects, and air from reaching the precious contents within. It was the ultimate security system for the eternal slumber, far more effective than any "do not disturb" sign. But preservation wasn't just about dead kings. It was about knowledge, about records, about the very fabric of society. Imagine a time before digital files and fireproof safes. How did you ensure a crucial treaty, a valuable literary work, or a family's genealogy survived the ravages of time, fire, flood, or even curious mice? Enter the humble wax tablet. This quirky tidbit, often overlooked, reveals another facet of beeswax's value. These portable, reusable writing surfaces, typically made of wood recessed and filled with a layer of darkened beeswax, were the ancient world's equivalent of an erasable whiteboard. You'd scratch your notes, letters, or accounts into the soft wax with a stylus, and when you were done, you'd simply smooth the surface with the blunt end of the stylus and write something new. For important, non-ephemeral documents, however, papyrus and parchment were used, and here again, beeswax proved its worth. Scrolls, after being meticulously rolled, were often sealed with beeswax to protect the delicate material from humidity, insects, and accidental unrolling. A blob of warm beeswax, pressed with a unique signet ring, became the definitive mark of authenticity, a tamper-evident seal that guaranteed the sender's identity and the document's integrity. Breaking the wax seal was a serious business. It was the ancient equivalent of opening someone's private mail, but with far graver consequences. Historians still argue whether certain ancient dyes and inks incorporated beeswax directly into their composition to improve longevity and adherence to surfaces, or if it was primarily used as a protective top coat. Some theories even suggest that early forms of varnishes for valuable papyri and scrolls were beeswax-based, providing a transparent, protective layer that repelled water and deterred mold. Regardless, its presence in the preservation of written works underscores its central role in safeguarding intellectual and administrative heritage. Think of the frescoes on the walls of Pompeii, vibrant after nearly 2 millennia, or the detailed carvings from ancient Sumer. While many factors contribute to their survival, beeswax, often blended into paints or used as a consolidant for fragile stone and wood, acted as an unsung hero. It provided a flexible, water-resistant binder and sealant, protecting the artistic endeavors of humanity from the relentless assault of time and the elements. It offered a kind of timeless hug, keeping everything together. This wasn't just about saving physical objects. It was about preserving stories, beliefs, warnings, and beauty for future generations. Even those who, like you, might be listening in the comfort of their beds, thousands of years later. It was the original save button, a low-tech, high-impact solution to the problem of entropy. Artistry and ingenuity. You feel the gentle give beneath your thumb, the pliable warmth of the amber-hued block, still bearing the faint scent of honey and blossoms. It molds to your touch, a raw promise of form. Your fingers, guided by an unseen hand, coax contours from the yielding mass, a subtle curve here, a sharp angle there, transforming inert matter into nascent life. This isn't just a simple chunk of golden goodness, the kind that might have once illuminated your ancient evenings, or sealed those priceless papyri, protecting secrets that, let's be honest, you probably still wouldn't understand if you could read hieroglyphs. No, this is something far more profound. A canvas for imagination, a conduit for beauty, a medium of pure, unadulterated artistry. You're not merely holding a candle in waiting. You're cradling the genesis of masterworks, an ancient plasticine that allowed minds to leap from abstract thought to tangible form. Long before polymers and resins, beeswax was the sculptor's silent partner, the painter's vibrant secret. Its very nature, soft and yielding when warm, firm and durable when cool, made it indispensable. Imagine, for a moment, the bustling workshops of ancient Greece, a symphony of hammers on metal, the low hum of conversation, and the ever-present, almost hypnotic, scent of molten wax. Here, the humblest bee product embarked on its most spectacular artistic journey. The lost wax casting method, or sire, letter 1d6 31 letter 1d6 26 letter 1d6 33 letter 1d6 25 letter 1d6 36 letter 1d6 26. You watch as a sculptor, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously applies layer after layer of warm beeswax onto a core of clay, shaping the musculature of a god, the drapery of a toga, the delicate features of a mythical beast. This isn't a quick sketch. This is the definitive model, perfect in every detail, for what will eventually become a towering bronze statue. Think about the sheer patience required, the steady hand, the unwavering vision. One slip, one wobble, one moment of carelessness, and you're not just ruining a day's work. You're potentially condemning months of effort for a master sculptor. And frankly, in those days, a major screw-up could lead to, well, let's just say your career prospects, and indeed your very survival, might suddenly become rather precarious. Your boss, perhaps a short-tempered Roman patrician with a penchant for throwing things, probably wouldn't be impressed with your newfound artistic freedom. Once the wax model is perfect, it's encased in successive layers of clay, forming a robust outer mold. Then the whole assembly is fired. And here's where the magic and the lost part happens. As the mold heats, the beeswax inside melts and drains away, leaving a perfectly hollow cavity, a ghost of the sculpture within the hardened clay. Molten bronze, shimmering like liquid sun, is then poured into this void. When the metal cools and the outer mold is carefully chipped away, what remains is a breathtaking bronze sculpture, a testament not just to the artisan's skill, but to the humble bee's unparalleled contribution. From the intricate bronze statues of ancient Greece and Rome to the colossal Buddhas of East Asia, the foundation for these metallic masterpieces was almost invariably a painstakingly crafted beeswax model. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians or the Mesopotamians first perfected the lost wax technique, a testament to its ancient origins and widespread adoption across civilizations. It wasn't just for grand statues either. Tiny figurines, intricate jewelry, even functional tools found their initial form in wax. Beyond shaping metal, beeswax also brought color to life in ways that still astound modern eyes. You step into a different workshop now, the air thick with the smell of warm wax, sure, but also earthy pigments. Crushed lapis lazuli, vibrant ochres, deep reds from cinnabar. This is the domain of encaustic painting, a technique where pigments are mixed with heated beeswax and then applied to a surface, often wood or stone, with a variety of tools. Unlike tempera or fresco, encaustic offered a unique luminosity and depth of color that was simply unmatched. Imagine applying paint that's warm, almost liquid, then watching it cool and harden, locking in the brilliance. It's like painting with a crayon that's had a really good spa day. The most famous examples of this vibrant artistry are undoubtedly the Fayum mummy portraits from Roman Egypt. As you gaze upon them, you see faces that seem to leap across millennia, their eyes alive, their expressions serene or contemplative. These weren't stylized depictions. They were startlingly realistic portraits of the deceased, painted while they were alive and then affixed to their mummified remains. The beeswax pigment mixture, applied in luscious, thick strokes, created a texture and vibrancy that has endured for nearly 2,000 years, often looking as fresh as if painted yesterday. It's a stark contrast to many other ancient paints which have faded or flaked away. Did you know that in some medieval European courts, wax effigies of monarchs were sometimes used in lieu of the actual person for certain ceremonies, particularly funerals, to signify the continuity of the monarchy? Imagine attending a state funeral only to find a perfectly sculpted wax stand-in. A little morbid, perhaps, but certainly a quirky tidbit for your next dinner party. A reminder of wax's versatility even in the strangest of contexts. Beeswax's artistic footprint wasn't limited to grand sculptures or portraits. It served as a resist in dyeing textiles, allowing patterns to emerge as colors were applied. It was used in intricate seals, not just for preservation, as we discussed, but for their decorative impression, a sign of authority and taste. Small anatomical models, crucial for early medical study, were often crafted from wax, allowing for detailed, three-dimensional representation long before sophisticated imaging. It even found its way into early map-making, used to raise topographical features, creating a tactile representation of terrain. From the delicate touch of a master sculptor to the bold stroke of an encaustic painter, beeswax was the silent, golden thread weaving through the tapestry of human creativity, reminding us that sometimes the most humble of natural resources can inspire the greatest feats of artistry and ingenuity. You reach into the cool, damp earth of an ancient apothecary, your fingers brushing against clay jars and bundles of drying herbs. The air here is thick, a sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance that isn't quite floral, not quite woody, but a comforting blend of both. You lift a small, unadorned pot, its surface smooth from countless hands, and pop the lid. Immediately, the scent clarifies: beeswax. Not just any beeswax, but the kind imbued with generations of healing wisdom, a golden balm that whispers of relief and restoration. You dip a finger in, and it's soft, pliable, melting slightly with your body heat, ready to soothe. For the ancient world, beeswax wasn't merely a byproduct of honey production. It was a cornerstone of medicine and a secret weapon in the endless battle against the ravages of time and the elements. Imagine a world without sterile bandages, without modern antiseptics, without the comforting relief of an over-the-counter cream. Your skin is your first and often only line of defense. And when that line was breached, when wounds festered or rashes bloomed, what did you turn to? This very substance, refined by the tireless work of bees. Ancient apothecaries, from the sun-baked clinics of Egypt to the bustling pharmacies of Rome, considered beeswax an indispensable base for their most potent concoctions. Its unique properties made it a perfect emulsifier, binding oil and water together in smooth, stable ointments and salves. You see them grinding herbs, simmering oils, and then, with careful precision, melting in chunks of pure beeswax. This wasn't just about mixing ingredients. It was about creating a delivery system, a protective shield that held the medicinal properties close to the skin, preventing evaporation and offering a barrier against further contamination. Think of it as the original slow-release patch, only it smelled infinitely better than most modern ones. When a gladiatorial combatant returned from the arena with a gaping wound, or a farmer suffered a deep cut from his tools, it was a beeswax-based unguent that would be painstakingly applied. Its occlusive nature formed a semi-permeable layer, protecting the wound from dirt and infection while still allowing the skin to breathe. For burns, the cooling effect and protective barrier were invaluable, preventing fluid loss and promoting healing. Even common ailments like chapped lips, dry skin, or aching muscles found relief in these waxy preparations. You might scoff, thinking about your fancy triple antibiotic ointment, but in an age where a minor skin infection could quickly become a death sentence, these simple beeswax remedies were nothing short of life-saving. Oh, and if you accidentally ingested too much of that miracle cure back then, Let's just say you probably wouldn't survive this healing process anyway. But beeswax's dominion extended beyond the realm of healing into the glamorous, and sometimes alarming, world of ancient beauty rituals. You're standing before a polished bronze mirror, scrutinizing your reflection, much like an Egyptian noblewoman or a Roman matron might have done thousands of years ago. What do you see? Perhaps a patch of dry skin or hair that refuses to lie flat. And what do you reach for? A pot of creamy beeswax. In ancient Egypt, where pristine skin was a mark of status and piety, beeswax was a core ingredient in a myriad of cosmetic preparations. It formed the base for rich skin creams designed to combat the harsh desert sun and wind. They'd mix it with oils like moringa or castor, and often infuse it with fragrances like myrrh or frankincense, creating luxurious balms that moisturized, protected, and perfumed the skin. These weren't just about looking good. They were about preserving the delicate balance of the body in extreme conditions, a precursor to your SPF and anti-aging creams, albeit with less scientific backing and a whole lot more mysticism. The Romans, ever pragmatic yet devoted to their appearance, also embraced beeswax in their beauty regimens. Their famous cold cream was essentially a blend of olive oil, rosewater, and beeswax, a formula surprisingly similar to some artisanal products you might find today. This cream was used not just for moisturizing, but also for cleansing the face, demonstrating beeswax's mild surfactant properties. It also featured in hair pomades, helping to sculpt elaborate hairstyles that would make a modern stylist weep with despair or envy, depending on their ambition. Imagine trying to get a perfect coiffure with just beeswax and a bone comb. It certainly makes battling static electricity seem like a walk in the park. Beeswax's role as a protective agent was also key in cosmetics. It provided a natural barrier, helping makeup adhere better and preventing environmental damage. This was crucial in an era where beauty often meant heavy mineral-based pigments that needed a stable, non-irritating base. Historians still argue whether the perceived, miraculous, healing properties of beeswax in certain ancient remedies were purely placebo, or if the humble substance truly held the antiseptic and anti-inflammatory power we now understand through modern science. What is clear, however, is that ancient civilizations relied on it with an almost unwavering faith. A quirky tidbit often overlooked: beeswax even played a role in ancient dental hygiene, albeit a minor one. While not a primary ingredient in toothpaste, there's evidence that it was sometimes used to fill small cavities or to create temporary molds for damaged teeth, demonstrating an early understanding of its malleability and protective qualities. It was far from a root canal, but it offered some relief, a bit like putting a tiny, waxy Band-Aid on a toothache. So when you consider the sheer versatility, the fundamental utility, and the profound impact of beeswax on ancient well-being and appearance, its value truly begins to outshine gold. Gold could adorn, but it couldn't heal a wound. It could symbolize wealth, but it couldn't soothe a sunburnt face. Beeswax, in its quiet, unassuming way, was the unsung hero of countless lives, a constant companion in the journey through illness and the pursuit of beauty. Its gentle, permeating presence was a comfort, a cure, and a cosmetic, all rolled into one golden, sticky miracle. You trek through the dense, sun-dappled forest, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms. Your stomach rumbles, a persistent drumbeat against the silence, reminding you of days without a true meal. Then a low, insistent hum growing louder with every step. You follow it, a primal instinct pulling you towards a hollowed-out tree, its ancient bark scarred by lightning. Swarms of tiny, golden-brown bodies dance at the entrance, a living curtain guarding a treasure. Your heart quickens. This is it. This is honey and beeswax. And if you go in without a plan, you probably won't survive this. Welcome to the humble, incredibly risky, yet profoundly rewarding beginnings of apiculture. For millennia, long before anyone thought of neatly stacked boxes or charming white suits with mesh veils, humanity's relationship with bees was a desperate, often painful dance. Imagine, if you will, the sheer audacity of our early ancestors. They weren't thinking about cross-pollination or colony collapse disorder. They saw a resource, a sweet, energy-rich substance, and a malleable, miraculous wax that promised light and preservation. The earliest evidence we have of this interaction isn't some grand temple, but a humble cave painting in Spain, the Cueva de la Araña, dating back perhaps 8,000 years. It depicts a figure, likely a woman, perilously climbing a vine ladder to reach a wild beehive, surrounded by buzzing insects. No protective gear, no smoke, just sheer guts and a likely very swollen face later. You'd probably call that a bad day at the office, even if the office was a sun-drenched cliff face. This wasn't just foraging. It was the dawn of a new understanding. From simply plundering wild nests, our ancestors slowly, tentatively began to observe. They noticed that bees returned to the same places, that they built predictable structures. This observation led to the earliest forms of what we might generously call beekeeping. Initially, it involved little more than setting out hollow logs or clay pots near existing colonies, hoping the bees would move in. It was a bit like leaving out a spare room for a very particular, very stingy, and occasionally aggressive tenant. If they liked your digs, great. If not, well, back to square one, or rather, back to risking your life for a spoonful of sugar. As societies grew, so did the sophistication, or at least the intentionality, of beekeeping. In ancient Egypt, around 2400 BCE, tomb reliefs from the Sun Temple of Nusera show a developed system. You see workers blowing smoke into hives, breaking combs, and collecting honey in pots. They used horizontal cylindrical hives, often made of pottery or woven reeds, stacked in rows. It wasn't exactly a walk in the park. The smoke was for pacification, not absolute safety, and the ancient beekeepers certainly earned every drop of honey and flake of wax. One mainstream historical fact is that these early Egyptian practices demonstrate a highly organized, if rudimentary, system of managed apiculture, indicating that the value of these products justified significant effort and risk. The perilous nature of the craft extended beyond just the stingers. Accessing hives often meant climbing trees, navigating treacherous terrain, or dealing with defensive swarms that could chase you for a surprising distance. Imagine trying to get your hands on a honeycomb, perhaps in a deep cleft of a rock face, with nothing but rudimentary tools and the nagging thought that you might slip and fall, or worse, be stung into oblivion. It was a job for the brave, the desperate, or perhaps the incredibly foolish. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some ancient cultures, like the Mayans, developed specific rituals to appease the bee gods before harvesting, believing that disrespect could lead to failed harvests or divine retribution via thousands of tiny, angry spears. No wonder they took it seriously. Getting stung by an angry god sounds worse than 1,000 ordinary stings. But beekeeping was not just about survival. It was deeply intertwined with the sacred. Bees were seen as messengers from the divine, symbols of industry, order, and even resurrection. In ancient Greece, bees were often associated with nymphs and goddesses like Demeter and Artemis. The priestesses of Demeter were sometimes called Melissa, meaning bee. Honey was considered a food of the gods, nectar, and ambrosia, granting immortality. Beeswax, too, held a spiritual significance, burning cleanly and brightly, symbolizing purity and the eternal flame. It was used in religious ceremonies, as offerings, and as a component in rituals for protection and healing. Historians still argue whether the earliest domestication efforts were primarily driven by the desire for honey as a food source or for beeswax's versatile properties, especially its role in religious rites and practical applications like waterproofing and lighting. The yield, honey, and beeswax truly made the peril worth it. Honey was a caloric goldmine, a natural sweetener, a medicinal balm, and a fermentable base for mead, the drink of choice for many ancient revelers. Beeswax, as we've discussed before, was even more indispensable. It lit their nights, preserved their dead, waterproofed their boats, and served as a medium for their art. It was the ancient world's Swiss Army knife, if that knife also smelled faintly of flowers and could illuminate a dark tomb. So, the next time you drizzle a bit of honey on your toast, or light a beeswax candle for ambience, take a moment to appreciate the daring, often painful, journey of those first beekeepers. They literally risked life and limb, not for fame or fortune, but for the sweet, golden liquid and the remarkably useful wax that quite literally helped build civilizations. Sweet dreams. The church's sacred light. The insatiable demand for beeswax candles by religious institutions fueled its unparalleled value across Europe. You step into the echoing vastness of a medieval cathedral, the air thick with the scent of old stone, damp earth, and something else, something sweet, pure, and profoundly ancient. Before you, hundreds, perhaps thousands, of golden flames dance and sway, each a tiny beacon against the perpetual twilight of the nave. You watch them, mesmerized, as the light shimmers on gilded altars, illuminates the intricate carvings of saints, and casts dancing shadows that play tricks on your eyes in the high, vaulted ceilings. This isn't just illumination. It's a living, breathing testament to devotion, an almost palpable presence. And every single one of those flames, my friend, is born from beeswax. If you had to maintain this level of spiritual luminosity, day in and day out, across every church, abbey, and monastery in medieval Europe, your savings account, and probably your sanity, wouldn't survive it. For the church, light wasn't merely a practical necessity to read sacred texts or navigate darkened cloisters. It was a profound theological symbol. Christ himself was the light of the world, and candles became a physical manifestation of that divine illumination, a way to chase away the spiritual darkness. They represented prayer, sacrifice, and the perpetual presence of God. You can almost feel the weight of expectation on these humble wicks and wax. Imagine the sheer volume. Daily masses, vespers, matins, baptisms, funerals, feast days, processionals, vigils. The list, like the flickering flame, was endless. Each ceremony demanded candles, often in precise numbers and sizes, from the towering Paschal candle, heavy with symbolism, to the tiny votives lit by pilgrims seeking solace or miracles. Now you might be thinking, why beeswax? Couldn't they just use, regular candles? Ah, but that's where the magic and the immense value comes in. Remember those smoky, smelly tallow candles we've discussed? The ones made from animal fat that dripped grease and filled your humble abode with a stench that would make a modern aromatherapist faint. The church, in its pursuit of purity and sanctity, deemed such crude illumination inappropriate for the divine presence. Tallow reeked of the earthly, the animalistic, the profane. It smoked like a medieval chimney, blackening frescoes and obscuring precious iconography. It spluttered and died without warning, an unpredictable flicker in a space that demanded steadfast, unwavering light. Beeswax, on the other hand, was perfection. It burned with a clean, bright flame, producing minimal smoke. Its natural scent, subtly sweet with hints of honey and the summer fields, was far more agreeable than rendering fat. More importantly, it was considered pure, a virgin substance produced by virgin bees, a perfect metaphor for the Virgin Mary, whose purity was central to Christian dogma. This symbolic connection elevated beeswax beyond a mere commodity. It became a sacred material. This belief wasn't just theological fluff. It profoundly impacted the supply chain. Bishops and abbots demanded pure beeswax, often specifying that it be unadulterated, free from cheaper fillers or impurities. This stringent requirement meant that beekeepers and wax merchants had to maintain high standards, adding another layer of complexity and cost to its production. Think about the economics of it. If you're a large monastery, say, the Abbey of Cluny in its heyday, or a major cathedral like Notre Dame, you're not just buying a dozen candles for Sunday service. You're buying hundreds, thousands, even tons of beeswax every year. Historians still argue whether the church's demand directly spurred the earliest large-scale commercial apiculture operations, or if it merely amplified an existing trend. What's undeniable is the scale. The monastic orders, in particular, often became self-sufficient, establishing vast apiaries within their own lands, seeing beekeeping not just as an economic necessity, but as a pious endeavor. The bees, after all, were God's creatures, and their wax was a gift for his worship. But even these monastic apiaries couldn't always meet the insatiable demand, leading to extensive trade networks. The sheer volume of beeswax needed transformed it into a critical economic driver across medieval Europe. Merchants specifically traded in wax, transporting it from regions where beekeeping flourished, often Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, and parts of Scandinavia, to the more densely populated and religiously fervent Western European kingdoms. Imagine the journey. Carts laden with heavy wax blocks trundling across muddy roads, ships carrying precious cargo across turbulent seas, all to keep the sacred flames burning. This wasn't just a niche market. It was a powerhouse industry. Towns and cities often had dedicated wax chandlers' guilds, highly skilled artisans who knew the secrets of rendering, purifying, and molding wax into candles of every size and purpose. They were the unsung heroes of medieval illumination, ensuring that the light of faith never dimmed. A quirky tidbit. During certain periods, particularly in the later Middle Ages, the quality of beeswax became such a point of contention that strict regulations were put in place. Some royal decrees even mandated that all wax used in churches be tested for purity, often by smelling it for impurities or checking its color for signs of adulteration. It was serious business. You could face hefty fines or even imprisonment for supplying impure wax for sacred purposes. Talk about quality control. It wasn't just about religious piety. It was about protecting a highly valuable commodity and ensuring its spiritual efficacy. The value of beeswax was so entrenched that it was often used as a form of payment, a medium of exchange, or even a tax. You might pay your feudal dues in wax, or a tenant might offer a certain number of pounds of wax to their lord. It was stable, durable and universally recognized as valuable, making it an excellent alternative to coinage, which could be scarce or unreliable. This wasn't just some fringe bartering system. It was integrated into the very fabric of the medieval economy. Its utility and symbolic significance combined to give it a market power that, in some contexts, genuinely rivaled that of precious metals. When you consider that a single large cathedral might consume hundreds of pounds of beeswax annually, you start to grasp the scale of the financial commitment, and thus, the incredible value placed upon this humble bee product. The church's light truly was, in more ways than one, made of gold. You feel the chill of the unheated scriptorium, the scratch of a quill on parchment echoing in the quiet. The year is, let's say 1150. You're a peasant, barely scraping by, and your lord demands his due. But it's not just grain or labor he wants. Oh no, he wants beeswax. You might chuckle, thinking, beeswax? For taxes? What am I supposed to light his castle with my sweat and a bit of honey-scented wax? But that chuckle would quickly fade when you realize this isn't some quaint quirk. It's the very backbone of the medieval economy, a silent hum of commerce far more vital than the jingle of a few silver pennies. This golden substance, remember, the very stuff that illuminated ancient nights and sealed secrets for pharaohs, now holds the purse strings of kingdoms. Imagine a time when coin was scarce and trust was, shall we say, a bit sticky. In such a world, a tangible, stable commodity became essential. And beeswax, with its incredible versatility, its long shelf life, and its constant, voracious demand from the church for sacred candles, naturally stepped into that role. You see, the church, with its myriad monasteries and cathedrals, needed light, constant, and pure. And for them, only beeswax would do. So if you were a landowner, a tenant, or even a humble beekeeper, a job that, remember, could easily get you stung to death or fall from a precarious perch, so you probably won't survive this career choice, beeswax wasn't just a byproduct. It was liquid gold, or rather, solid, malleable gold. In Anglo-Saxon England, for instance, records show that beeswax was a common form of tribute. Land might be granted with the proviso that the recipient furnish a certain amount of wax to the local monastery or royal court. Think about it. Instead of a direct tax on your meager crops, you were taxed on the buzzing, industrious labor of your bees. It meant fostering beekeeping, a rather ingenious form of agricultural taxation, wouldn't you say? Honey, I'm home, and guess what? The tax man wants a 20-pound block of wax this year. Better start chatting up those bees, darling. It certainly puts a different spin on your annual tax returns, doesn't it? No more trying to figure out if your Netflix subscription is a business expense. This wasn't just a localized oddity. Across medieval Europe, beeswax was a recognized medium of exchange. If you wanted to purchase timber for your new barn, or perhaps some fine Flemish cloth, and you didn't have enough coinage, a hefty block of good quality beeswax might well seal the deal. Its value was remarkably consistent because the demand, particularly from religious institutions, was unwavering. Imagine trying to pay for your groceries today with, say, a block of artisanal soap. You might get a few strange looks, but in the medieval era, if that soap was beeswax, you'd be hailed as a savvy financier. Okay, maybe not, but you get the picture. Monasteries, especially the Cistercian order, became veritable industrial centers for beeswax production. Their vast land holdings and disciplined labor forces allowed them to manage thousands of beehives. These monastic communities weren't just spiritual havens. They were economic powerhouses, exporting massive quantities of beeswax across Europe. Their wax was prized for its purity and consistent quality, making it a highly desirable commodity in international trade. It's almost as if they cornered the market on sustainable candle production, long before anyone even thought of sustainable. You could say they were the original beeswax magnates, though their robes probably weren't lined with gold, but rather with more beeswax. The value of beeswax extended beyond mere commercial transactions. It was incorporated into legal settlements, fines, and even dowries. A bride's family might contribute a certain weight of wax as part of her marriage portion, signifying wealth and foresight. Yes, she comes with a dowry of 2 oxen, 3 sheep, and enough beeswax to light your manor for a year. This wasn't just about lighting. It was about status, about showing you had access to this precious resource. It was a clear signal of your economic standing, far more than a pile of dirty coins. Historians still argue whether the sheer volume of beeswax trade truly fostered complex interregional economic networks, or if it merely facilitated local transactions more efficiently. Some scholars contend that the demand from the church created highly specialized trade routes dedicated solely to wax, while others believe it simply piggybacked on existing mercantile paths. What's clear, however, is that beeswax became a significant metric of wealth and prosperity. Lords and kings measured their riches not only in land and silver, but also in the tons of wax stored in their treasuries. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some regions, specific types of beeswax, perhaps from bees feeding on certain flowers, were considered superior and commanded higher prices. It was like the difference between single-origin coffee and your average diner brew. Imagine a medieval connoisseur sniffing a block of wax. Ah, yes, notes of heather and a hint of ancient oak. This will make a truly illuminating candle for the Yuletide feast. It sounds almost comical, but the subtle variations in color, aroma, and burn quality were genuinely recognized and valued. This wasn't just a commodity. It was an artisanal product. The practicalities of this wax-based economy were fascinating. Merchants would transport large, heavy blocks of beeswax across vast distances, often using rivers or well-trodden land routes. Imagine the logistics. Protecting these valuable shipments from bandits or accidental melting in the summer sun must have been a constant headache. You might think, why not just use a lighter, more portable form of currency? But remember, gold and silver coinage was often debased or scarce, and its value could fluctuate wildly. Beeswax, on the other hand, was reliably valuable, stable, and critically, always in demand. It was the original hard currency, if you will. This reliance on beeswax also highlights the sophisticated understanding of beekeeping that had developed over centuries. It wasn't just about wild honey hunting anymore. It was about managed apiaries, about understanding the cycles of the bees, and about harvesting not just honey, but also the valuable wax. The very act of collecting and processing the wax became an integral part of the medieval economic machine, a steady, rhythmic contribution to the coffers of kings and the altars of churches. It literally kept the lights on, both spiritually and economically. So the next time you light a beeswax candle, or perhaps even admire a piece of historical artwork preserved with it, remember its astonishing journey from humble bee product to the very sinews of medieval power. You're not just looking at a wax. You're looking at a relic of a time when the hum of a beehive could dictate the fortunes of kingdoms, a substance that held more sway than any coin in circulation. It was a tangible, fragrant symbol of wealth, piety, and the illuminating power of nature, truly the currency of kingdoms. You shift your weight, settling deeper into the unseen velvet cushions of time, the scent of ancient forests and workshops still lingering in the air. We've spun tales of beeswax's mystical glow, its sacred fire illuminating cathedrals, its role as a silent guardian of pharaohs' secrets, even its artistic flourish on sarcophagi and vibrant frescoes. You've seen it shape the very face of ancient beauty and heal the infirm. And you've even glimpsed its surprising turn as the very currency that kept medieval kingdoms afloat. But beyond the grand stages of ritual and high finance, beyond the artistic masterpieces and the healing balms, beeswax whispered its true magic in the mundane. It wasn't just about light, remember. Oh no, its daily utility was so vast, so pervasive, that it seamlessly wove itself into the very fabric of ancient life, making your modern existence, with its synthetic wonders and instant fixes, seem almost fragile. You probably wouldn't survive a week without your waterproofing sprays and lubricant cans, let alone trying to keep your boots from falling apart in a downpour using only animal fat and good intentions. Imagine, if you will, the relentless damp of a medieval hovel, the perpetual chill seeping through stone and thatch. Or perhaps the arid dust of an Egyptian marketplace, constantly threatening to dry and crack every precious item. In these worlds, where every possession was hard-won and painstakingly crafted, preservation wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity, a battle against decay and the elements. And beeswax, humble and unassuming, was their quiet champion. Think first of waterproofing. Not just for boats, though it certainly played a role in caulking seams and protecting hulls from the relentless gnaw of salt water. No, think closer to home, to the very clothes on your back, the shoes on your feet, the tents over your head, and the containers that held your precious food and water. Leather, for instance, was ubiquitous. From soldiers' armor and shields to cobblers' footwear, from the parchment scrolls that held the sum of human knowledge to the very straps that bound your burdens, leather was everywhere. But leather left untreated is a thirsty material, absorbing moisture, becoming stiff and brittle when dry, and rotting when perpetually wet. Enter beeswax. Warm it, soften it, then rub it into the fibers, and you create an impermeable barrier. Your tunic, your cloak, your boots, all rendered resistant to the driving rain. It was, in essence, the Gore-Tex of the ancient world, only instead of a patented membrane, it was the industrious byproduct of a tiny insect. You could imagine a Roman legionary, meticulously rubbing beeswax into his caligy, his military boots, knowing that his comfort, and perhaps even his very ability to march through a sodden landscape, depended on it. This wasn't just about keeping dry. It was about maintaining equipment, extending its lifespan, and ensuring its functionality in hostile environments. This practical application alone, the preservation of essential gear, speaks volumes to its value. Then there's the realm of polishing. Have you ever considered how dull and lifeless wood or metal can become with constant use and exposure? In an era before chemical polishes, before specialized waxes derived from petroleum, beeswax was the go-to. Wooden furniture, wooden bowls, the very beams and floors of houses. A regular application of beeswax not only brought out the natural luster of the wood, but also protected it from drying out and cracking. It filled in minute scratches, repelled dust, and offered a subtle honeyed sheen that spoke of care and longevity. Imagine walking into a Viking longhouse, not just smelling the smoke and the damp earth, but also catching the faint, sweet scent of polished wood, a testament to the daily ministrations of beeswax. It wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about maintaining structural integrity, preventing rot and decay, and making things last. The same held true for certain metals. While not a primary metal polish in the way we understand it today, thin coatings of beeswax could protect iron from rust, particularly on tools and weapons. It formed a thin, protective layer, sealing the metal from the oxygen and moisture that would otherwise lead to corrosion. It was a simple yet profoundly effective way to preserve the sharp edge of an axe or the integrity of a precious bronze artifact. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of beeswax as a protective coating for metals truly extended their lifespan significantly in all environments, or if its primary benefit was more aesthetic. And lubrication. Oh, the squeaks and groans of a world without WD-40. Every cartwheel, every hinge, every wooden mechanism, every loom, every drawbridge, every spinning wheel, they all cried out for something to ease their friction. Animal fats were used, certainly, but they could go rancid, attracting pests and becoming less effective over time. Beeswax, however, offered a superior solution. Its unique molecular structure made it an excellent solid lubricant. A thin layer applied to moving parts would significantly reduce friction, making tasks easier, more efficient, and prolonging the life of the machinery. Think of the massive wooden gears in a watermill grinding wheat into flour. Imagine the sheer effort required if those gears were constantly seizing up due to friction. A regular application of beeswax meant smoother operation, less wear and tear, and ultimately, a more productive and reliable machine. Consider the bowstring of an archer. A quick rub with beeswax ensured a smoother release, greater consistency, and less fraying of the string itself. It's the little things, isn't it? The subtle ways in which a seemingly simple substance could unlock greater efficiency and ease in a world that often demanded backbreaking labor. Even in crafts and artistry, beyond the grand sculptures we discussed earlier, beeswax was a workhorse. Remember the discussions about sealing valuable documents and scrolls, protecting them from the ravages of time and dampness. That wasn't just for royal decrees. Ordinary merchants used it to seal letters and packages, ensuring tamper-proof delivery. Jewelers used it as a resist in their casting processes, a temporary mold or barrier that could be melted away. Scribes used it to prepare parchment, rubbing it in to create a smoother, more receptive surface for ink, allowing for finer lines and preventing the ink from bleeding. The very act of writing, the preservation of knowledge, was, in a quiet way, supported by the humble bee. Consider the quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptians, ever resourceful, didn't just use beeswax for mummification and sealing canopic jars. They also used it to create early forms of dentistry. Seriously. Dental historians have unearthed evidence of beeswax mixed with other substances being used as fillings for cavities or as a way to hold loose teeth in place. While you certainly wouldn't want to try that at home, it highlights the incredibly versatile, almost miraculous properties they attributed to this substance. It wasn't just a waterproofing agent. It was a dental adhesive, a component in early prosthetics. This showcases a level of intimate knowledge and experimentation with natural materials that is truly astounding. So when you consider the pervasive presence of beeswax in daily life, keeping homes watertight, tools sharp, garments dry, mechanisms running smoothly, and even aiding in rudimentary dental care, you start to grasp its true omnipresence. It wasn't just a luxury item for the wealthy or a ceremonial requirement for the pious. It was a foundational commodity for everyone. Without it, daily existence would have been considerably more arduous, more uncomfortable, and far more prone to the rapid decay of essential goods. The very wheels of ancient industry and household management would have ground to a halt without its lubricating and preserving touch. From the smallest needle to the largest ship, beeswax was there, silently working its magic, making life just a little bit more manageable, a little bit more enduring. It was, in its quiet way, the grease, the polish, and the umbrella of the ancient world. An unassuming hero of utility, proving its worth not in dazzling displays of wealth, but in the relentless, demanding rhythms of everyday survival. Imagine the dense, primeval forest pressing in on you. The air hangs thick and humid, a tapestry of unknown scents and distant animal calls. Your skin prickles, not just from the humidity, but from the low hum that vibrates faintly through the leaves, a sound that promises riches but whispers of pain. You're deep within ancient woods, far from any path, following a knowledge passed down through generations, a silent understanding of the land and its most diligent residents. You're not here for timber or game or even the sweet, sticky honey, not primarily. No, you're here for the byproduct, the architectural marvel of the hive, the very substance that once eclipsed gold in value, beeswax. This isn't your leisurely stroll through a manicured park, where the worst you encounter is a rogue squirrel eyeing your sandwich. This is a quest, a genuine expedition into the wild, where every rustle could be a predator, every uneven step a twisted ankle, and every tree a potential death trap. You move with a practiced stealth, your eyes scanning the canopy, your ears straining for the subtle change in that persistent hum. The sun, when it pierces the dense foliage, dances in ethereal shafts, illuminating motes of dust and occasionally the unmistakable golden-brown glint of what you seek. You're tracking, not deer but bees. Wild bees whose hives are often nestled high in ancient hollows, carved into cliff faces or tucked away in forgotten crevices. The trick you've learned isn't just to find them, but to observe their flight paths, tracing their industrious journeys back to the source. It's a slow, painstaking dance, sometimes involving baiting them with a small amount of honey, then watching, waiting, as they load up and make a beeline literally back to their home. You might follow a single bee for hours, through thorny thickets and over treacherous terrain, your muscles aching, your mind sharp, calculating every move. This, dear listener, is where your modern concept of easy access goes to die. You probably won't survive this without a few hundred stings, or a broken bone, or an unfortunate encounter with a very grumpy bear who also happens to have a sweet tooth. The sheer physical labor is immense. You carry a rudimentary kit, perhaps a woven basket, a small, tightly sealed container for the precious wax, a fire starter, and some smoky material, dried dung, punk wood, anything that will produce a thick, calming plume. There's no GPS, no satellite imagery to pinpoint the perfect tree. It's all instinct, accumulated wisdom, and the keen observation skills of someone whose survival depends on reading the nuanced language of nature. Imagine climbing a towering oak, its bark rough beneath your hands, your bare feet finding purchase on gnarled roots, the ground a dizzying distance below. You're not using ropes or harnesses. It's just you, gravity, and the desperate need for that glowing, fragrant treasure. The danger is palpable. While the goal is to calm the bees with smoke, a misjudgment, a sudden shift in wind, or a particularly aggressive colony can turn the harvest into a chaotic ballet of pain. A single bee sting, for most, is an annoyance. 100, 1,000? That's a medical emergency. Swarms can envelop you, their fury a living, stinging blanket. Historians still argue whether ancient beekeepers truly understood the concept of anaphylaxis, or if they simply attributed sudden, fatal reactions to divine displeasure or bad luck. Regardless, the risks were very real. And it wasn't just the bees. The very act of navigating untouched wilderness put you at the mercy of wolves, wild boars, and venomous snakes that might consider your ankle a perfectly good spot for a nap. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, it might protect your skin, but it won't deter a territorial boar. Then there's the specialized knowledge, the arcane wisdom passed down from elder to apprentice. It's knowing exactly which type of wood produces the best, coolest smoke too hot, and you anger the bees, too little, and they're simply curious. It's understanding the seasons, knowing when the hives are most productive, when the wax comb is fullest and most pliable. You learn to differentiate between fresh, pale comb, full of honey, and the older, darker comb, rich with the waxy goodness you crave. You learn to leave enough for the colony to survive, a crucial tenet of sustainable harvesting that even today, modern apiarists strive to perfect. The goal isn't to destroy the hive, but to borrow from it, ensuring a future harvest. It's a delicate balance, an act of respectful appropriation. You reach the hive, a dark opening in the trunk of an ancient tree, a constant stream of workers buzzing in and out. The hum here is deafening, a living vibration that rattles your bones. You carefully light your smoking material, creating a gentle, persistent plume. The smoke doesn't harm the bees, you know, but it masks their alarm pheromones, making it harder for them to communicate aggression. It also stimulates them to gorge on honey, thinking the hive is in danger and they need to store reserves for a quick escape. A full bee, as any experienced beekeeper will tell you, is a happy, or at least a sluggish bee. It's like us after Thanksgiving dinner, less inclined to pick a fight, more inclined for a nap. With the smoke working its magic, you slowly, carefully begin to cut away sections of the comb. It's a messy business, honey dripping, bits of propolis sticking to your fingers, the air thick with the sweet, musky scent of the hive. You're not just grabbing any old comb. You're selecting the ones heavy with wax, the ones that have served their purpose for the bees that are ripe for your harvest. This isn't just about brawn. It's about precision, about knowing where and how to cut without collapsing the entire structure. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that early cave paintings and rock art in various parts of the world, from Spain to Africa, depict humans harvesting honey and wax from wild colonies, sometimes showing them scaling cliffs or using ladders, proving this perilous art is as old as civilization itself. Once you have your precious haul, you carefully lower it to the ground, or descend with it yourself, protecting it from breakage and contamination. The journey back is just as arduous, burdened now with the sticky, fragile comb. You might be carrying dozens of pounds of it, each ounce a testament to your courage and skill. The value of this raw material, before any refinement, before it became the polished candles or the sealing wax you remember, was immense. It was the purest form of wealth harvested directly from the wild. This meticulous, dangerous process highlights why beeswax was so incredibly valuable. It wasn't merely a commodity. It was a testament to human resilience and ingenuity in the face of nature's formidable defenses. Every piece of wax, every flickering candle, every sealed parchment, held within its very substance the story of a perilous journey, a brave individual, and a profound respect for the tiny architects who made it all possible. The sheer energy expenditure, the risks taken, the deep understanding required to simply obtain this raw material made its inherent worth skyrocket. It wasn't something you could simply dig out of the ground like a lump of ore. It demanded a physical and mental toll that gold, frankly, couldn't even begin to compete with. You couldn't just stumble upon a rich vein of beeswax. You had to earn it, often with sweat, blood, and a healthy dose of insect repellent, if you were lucky enough to have any. Global trade routes. You're standing on a dusty, sun-baked track, a whisper of wind rustling the brittle leaves of a lone acacia tree. Before you, a caravan stretches to the horizon, a slow-moving river of camels, donkeys, and human endurance, laden with treasures unimaginable to your modern sensibilities. You might expect to see silks shimmering, spices wafting their exotic perfumes, or glinting raw metals, but nestled amongst these more obvious riches, carefully packed in leather sacks and wooden chests, lies a substance whose value once rivaled gold itself. Beeswax, this isn't just a journey. It's a living, breathing testament to the world's oldest supply chain, a logistical marvel orchestrated without satellites or container ships. And honestly, if you were to try and navigate just one leg of this journey without GPS, fresh water, or a five-star hotel at the end, you probably won't survive this. Sleep well, by the way. As you join the procession, you feel the rhythm of ancient commerce, a slow, deliberate march dictated by weather, terrain, and the sheer fortitude of those who dared to connect distant lands. Beeswax, remember, was no mere afterthought. It was a cornerstone of ancient and medieval global trade routes. From the frosty forests of what we now call Russia and Scandinavia, where wild bees thrived, to the sun-drenched olive groves of the Mediterranean, and even deeper into the heart of Africa, the humble wax, painstakingly harvested, was a commodity of immense strategic importance. It wasn't just about lighting your way. It was about fueling economies, greasing the wheels of diplomatic relations, and ensuring the very continuity of culture. Imagine a merchant in Antioch, eyes bright with ambition, dispatching agents deep into the Pontic steppe, not for furs or slaves, but for beeswax. This isn't a scene you'll find in many epic historical dramas, which is a shame, because the negotiations for 1,000 pounds of high-quality, unadulterated beeswax were probably more tense than any sword fight. The Roman Empire, in particular, with its insatiable demand for light, writing tablets, and waterproofing for its massive navy, relied heavily on imported wax. Historians still argue whether the sheer volume of Roman beeswax imports from provinces like Dacia and Moesia directly contributed to the extensive deforestation seen in those regions, or if other factors, like timber for construction, played a larger role. Either way, the imperial appetite was voracious. You see it transported along the legendary Silk Road, not in vast quantities like silk itself, but as a high-value, relatively lightweight and non-perishable item, perfect for long-distance hauls. While it might sound like the most unglamorous cargo imaginable, imagine the relief of a Chinese alchemist receiving a fresh block of European beeswax, known for its specific properties for creating medicinal salves or sealing delicate scrolls. It shared the path with jade from the cotton, spices from India, and glassware from Syria, often serving as a secondary form of payment or a valuable commodity for bartering when hard currency was scarce or too bulky. It was, in many ways, the ancient world's equivalent of a universal cryptocurrency, just stickier. Then there are the maritime routes. Picture creaking cog ships sailing the Baltic Sea, their holds filled not just with salted fish and timber, but with casks of wax destined for the burgeoning cities of Western Europe. The Hanseatic League, that powerful medieval confederation of merchant guilds and market towns, played a pivotal role in this trade. They controlled vast networks, ensuring that beeswax from the heavily forested lands around the Baltic and into what is now Poland and Lithuania flowed consistently to the monastic houses and cathedrals of France, England, and Germany. They essentially created the first pan-European beeswax distribution network, complete with rigorous quality control. You wouldn't want to accidentally buy some fraudulent, adulterated wax, would you? That would be a truly sticky situation. Down south, across the vast Sahara, trans-Saharan trade routes also carried beeswax. From the sub-Saharan kingdoms, where beekeeping was a long-standing tradition, the wax moved north, exchanged for salt, textiles, and manufactured goods. It was valued for its use in local crafts, medicine, and in the burgeoning Islamic world, for its illumination in mosques and madrasas. This trade, often conducted by Berber nomads, linked diverse economies and cultures, showing just how pervasive and essential beeswax was, bridging not just continents, but entirely different ways of life. It's hard to imagine, in our age of instant gratification and Amazon Prime, the sheer determination and patience required to move such goods across such formidable distances. The very infrastructure of these trade routes, from the caravanserais that offered respite to weary travelers, to the bustling ports and market squares, all implicitly acknowledged the value of beeswax. Taxes were levied on it, tariffs imposed, and its movement carefully regulated, underscoring its importance to state coffers. It wasn't just a product. It was a strategic resource enabling the very functioning of society. Think of it, a world without bright, steady light after sunset, without sealed documents, without properly lubricated tools, without vibrant pigments for art. Beeswax wasn't merely traded. It was the invisible lubricant that kept the cogs of the ancient and medieval world turning. It was the unsung hero, the quiet workhorse of global commerce, far less flashy than a ruby or a roll of silk, but infinitely more practical and, for centuries, more consistently valuable. It made the entire ecosystem of global trade, from the humblest village market to the grandest imperial treasury, simply work. You're standing there in a bustling ancient marketplace. Dust motes dance in the slivers of sunlight piercing through rough-hewn awnings, mingling with the scent of spices, sweat, and, well, something a little less pleasant from the livestock pens. You clutch a small, rough pouch in your hand. Inside, on one side, a gleaming nugget of raw gold, dull but promising, hinting at wealth. On the other, a smooth, pale disk of beeswax, warm from your grip, radiating a subtle, sweet scent. Which one do you barter away first? Which one whispers promises of true survival, true comfort in this unforgiving world? It's a trick question, really. Because while your modern sensibilities scream, gold, duh, it's like money, the reality of ancient life paints a very different picture. Gold, in its raw, unrefined state, is beautiful. It's malleable. It catches the light. It announces status and power. You can wear it, you can mold it into intricate idols for your gods, or, if you're lucky, melt it down into currency that might pay for a few days' gruel. But here's the thing about gold. It doesn't keep your food from spoiling. It won't light your home when the sun dips below the horizon, plunging everything into an inky blackness that swallows all sound and comfort. It certainly won't heal your wounds or seal your precious papyrus scrolls from the ravages of time and damp. Beeswax, however, beeswax. That humble, earthy disc holds the very essence of utility. You see its potential not just in the soft glow of a candle, pushing back the terrifying specter of night, but in 1,000 other ways that gold simply couldn't touch. Imagine trying to waterproof your leather boots with a sliver of gold. Go on, try it. I'll wait. You'd probably just end up with really fancy, leaky footwear and a mild sense of personal failure. You probably won't survive this. Let's talk about the sheer, undeniable practicality. In an era where light was a luxury, a beeswax candle wasn't merely aesthetic. It was a lifeline. It meant extended hours for work, for reading, if you were among the privileged few who could, for social gatherings that didn't dissolve into fumbling in the dark. The light from a beeswax candle burned brighter, cleaner, and with less smoke than any tallow or oil lamp. It didn't just illuminate, it transformed the night. Gold, meanwhile, just sat there, reflecting the meager light you already had, doing absolutely nothing to create more. You could stack it in a vault, but what good is a pile of shiny metal if you can't see it? Or if your stored grains are rotting because you couldn't seal their containers? Consider preservation. We've touched on it before, haven't we? Remember those pharaohs? Their eternal resting places sealed not with gold leaf, though there was plenty of that around, sure, but with beeswax. Or the priceless parchments and documents, the very fabric of ancient knowledge, protected from moisture and insects by a simple wax coating. Gold, while impervious to decay, offers no such protective barrier. It's pretty, yes, but it doesn't stop the slow creep of degradation. It's like having a diamond-encrusted safe that lets water seep in through the cracks. What's the point? A mainstream historical fact, often overlooked, is that throughout much of antiquity and the medieval period, the true wealth of a household or a kingdom was measured not by the amount of precious metals in its coffers, but by its practical, renewable resources. Fertile land, abundant livestock, and yes, prolific beehives. These directly sustained life, whereas gold was primarily a medium of exchange or a symbol, often hoarded rather than actively utilized. And then there's the versatility. Beeswax was the ancient world's duct tape, its WD-40, and its finest skincare all rolled into one. It waterproofed ships, sealed wine amphorae, lubricated chariot axles, polished furniture, and even served as a base for cosmetics and medicines. Think about a craftsman meticulously sculpting a wax model for a bronze cast. He needs the precise, malleable quality of wax, not the rigid, unyielding nature of gold. Or a physician mixing healing salves. Beeswax binds the ingredients, provides a protective layer, soothes inflamed skin. Gold, on the other hand, is generally inert, offering little in the way of practical application beyond its inherent material properties for decoration or simple tools. It's like comparing a multi-tool to a very expensive, very shiny paperweight. There's a quirky tidbit here. In some ancient cultures, it was believed that beeswax, due to its miraculous properties and origins from the sacred bee, possessed inherent spiritual power, almost a living energy. Gold, while associated with deities and royalty, was often seen as inert, a symbol, whereas beeswax was an active agent. There are accounts from some early Germanic tribes that describe bees as direct messengers from the underworld, and their wax as imbued with protective magic, used in rituals to ward off evil spirits. A function gold could never fulfill, no matter how much you polished it. Gold was for the kings. Beeswax was for the people, for survival, for magic. Historians still argue whether the perceived value of gold throughout various historical periods was more a construct of scarcity and social agreement, or if it truly reflected a deeper intrinsic worth compared to materials like beeswax, which provided tangible, life-sustaining benefits. Was it simply a convenient, non-perishable store of wealth? Or did it truly hold more sway in the collective psyche, than the substance that kept you warm, fed, and healthy. You know, the stuff that actually mattered when you were trying not to freeze to death or die of dysentery. I mean, good luck trading a gold nugget for a clean latrine. So, when you consider the functional utility against the aesthetic appeal, beeswax consistently emerges as the workhorse, the unsung hero, the material that kept societies running. Gold was the crown on the king's head. Beeswax was the glue holding the kingdom together. Gold might make you look important, but beeswax kept you alive. And in a world where survival was a daily gamble, the choice was often clear. The sweet scent of utility, far more often than the glint of luxury, ruled the day. Flickering alternatives emerge. Witness the gradual shift as cheaper but inferior alternatives began to challenge beeswax's dominance in lighting. You're huddled by the hearth, not for warmth, but for light. The air is thick, not with the sweet, clean scent of honey and wildflowers you've come to associate with quality illumination, but with something far more visceral. A sputtering wick dips into a congealed pool of something grayish, and a thin plume of acrid smoke curls lazily upwards, stinging your eyes. This, my friend, is your new reality, the tallow candle. Gone, for many, are the days of the golden, steady glow of beeswax, replaced by these cheaper, nastier, but undeniably more accessible options. You blink, trying to clear your vision, but the dim, orange flicker does little to banish the deep shadows clinging to the corners of your tiny dwelling. Think of it this way. If beeswax was the artisanal, sustainably sourced, organic, gluten-free, single-origin coffee of the ancient world, then tallow was, well, it was instant coffee powder, scooped from the bottom of the tin, possibly with some questionable crumbs mixed in. Made from rendered animal fat, sheep or cattle suet, typically, tallow candles were the everyman's light. They were cheap, readily available wherever animals were butchered, and simple to produce. You didn't need a specialized apiarist or a vast trade network. You just needed a dead cow and a bit of ingenuity. But oh, the drawbacks. The smell alone could make your eyes water. A greasy, heavy odor that clung to clothes and furniture, a constant reminder of the animal it came from. Then there was the smoke, a persistent, sooty pall that blackened ceilings and lungs alike. You think your air filter works hard now? Imagine sharing a room with a dozen smoking animal fat candles. You probably wouldn't survive this without chronic lung issues, honestly. And the light itself. A pathetic, flickering apology for illumination, prone to guttering, dripping profusely, and burning down at an alarming rate. It was a battle against the encroaching darkness, not a gentle surrender. Yet, necessity is the mother of all invention, even if that invention smells like a damp abattoir. Alongside tallow, another contender emerged from the depths of poverty and practicality. The rushlight. You remember how painstaking and perilous the beeswax harvest was, requiring immense labor and specialized knowledge. The rushlight was its antithesis. You simply peeled a common marsh rush, leaving a thin strip of rind to provide structural integrity, and then dipped the exposed pith in melted fat, often bacon, grease, or kitchen drippings. Picture this. You're sitting by the fire, patiently dipping rushes, the faint scent of sizzling breakfast wafting through the air. A rather quirky tidbit of history, wouldn't you say? These rushlights were laughably cheap, literally costing pennies if not produced for free from local materials. They were the ultimate DIY lighting solution. But what they offered in affordability, they stripped away in performance. A typical rushlight might burn for a mere 15 to 30 minutes, producing a tiny, barely perceptible flame, little more than a glowing ember, casting a faint halo of light in the immediate vicinity. You couldn't read by it, you could barely knit by it, but you could perhaps avoid tripping over the cat in the dark. It was the absolute bare minimum, a testament to just how desperate people were for any form of artificial light. Then there were oil lamps, a technology far older than candles, but which also saw various iterations and improvements that made them more competitive. From simple open saucers holding olive oil or fish oil with a floating wick, they gradually evolved. Glass chimneys, for instance, were a game changer, improving combustion, reducing smoke, and making the flames steadier and brighter. While still often smoky and prone to spilling, and requiring a constant supply of oil, which could be expensive depending on the source, they offered a more consistent light than tallow or rushlights. An open oil lamp might not have smelled as bad as tallow, but the risk of fire was ever present. One clumsy knock, and your entire home could be engulfed in flames. The advent of these alternatives wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic overthrow of beeswax's reign, but rather a slow, creeping erosion of its monopoly, especially in everyday use. For centuries, beeswax held undisputed dominance as the premier light source, casting that radiant glow where darkness reigned supreme. But as populations grew and economies diversified, the demand for affordable light for the masses simply outstripped the supply of precious beeswax. It became a matter of scale and accessibility. You couldn't light every peasant's hovel with beeswax candles. There simply weren't enough bees or enough wealth. This created a tiered system of illumination. Beeswax, remember, maintained its exalted status in churches, in the grand halls of nobility, and for ceremonial purposes. Its clean burn, bright light, and pleasant scent were still prized for these high-status applications. The wealthy and the powerful continued to demand it, seeing its use as a reflection of their piety and prosperity. This is a mainstream historical fact. The church's demand alone was enough to keep beeswax highly valuable, even as alternatives spread. But for everyone else, for the vast majority of people toiling in workshops, cooking in smoky kitchens, or simply trying to get through the long, dark evenings, these cheaper alternatives became the norm. They were a compromise, certainly, a sacrifice of quality for sheer availability and affordability. It was a gradual shift, an economic realignment driven by the simple reality that light was a fundamental necessity, and not everyone could afford the best. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of these inferior alternatives truly threatened beeswax's market share, or simply expanded the overall market for artificial light, with beeswax maintaining its premium niche. Was it a competitive struggle, or did the market just grow larger, accommodating different tiers of lighting needs? It's a fascinating question that speaks to the nuanced interplay of technology, economics, and social class in shaping daily life. What is clear, however, is that while beeswax continued to be valued for its purity and superior qualities, its dominance as the sole source of artificial light began to flicker, challenged by the very alternatives it had so long outshone. Tallow's smoky ascent. Discover how animal fats, though less refined, slowly started to undercut beeswax's market share for illumination. You're nestled, warm and cozy, probably with a device emitting a cool blue light, but let's rewind. Picture your modest hovel, perhaps a tiny cottage in the sprawling, muddy outskirts of a medieval town. Night falls, as it always does, and the crisp autumn air starts to bite. You've had a long day, perhaps wrestling with a stubborn ox or trying to convince your neighbor that your turnip crop is superior. Now, the overwhelming darkness descends, thick and oppressive, making even your own hand a ghost in front of your face. You need light, desperately. Remember that precious, radiant glow of beeswax, the kind that lit cathedrals and crowned the tables of kings. That magnificent, clean-burning beacon of progress. Well, darling, you, the average Joe or Joan of the medieval era, aren't getting that. Not for your everyday illumination, anyway. That stuff was gold, quite literally in terms of its comparative value, and the effort required for its perilous harvest. You remember that whole ordeal, right? Climbing trees, braving angry swarms. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in a proper apiary back then without getting stung into next week. So while the grand churches consumed beeswax by the ton, casting a holy, pure light upon their congregants, your home, humble as it was, began to explore greasier alternatives. Enter tallow. Ah, tallow. The very word might conjure images of rendered animal fat, and you'd be exactly right. This isn't the delicate, sweet-smelling byproduct of industrious bees. This is the stuff of slaughterhouses and butchers' shops, the fat from cows, sheep, and pigs, slowly heated and clarified. Imagine the smell. Actually, don't. For the sake of your impending slumber, just imagine it as rustic. While beeswax exuded a faint, honeyed perfume as it burned, tallow wafted notes of roasting meat, perhaps a hint of barnyard, and a pervasive, greasy odor that clung to everything. Your clothes, your hair, your very soul. You'd wake up smelling like a particularly well-done steak, whether you'd had one for dinner or not. A little olfactory bonus with every candle free of charge. The process of making tallow candles was, by comparison to apiculture, utterly devoid of poetry. You didn't need specialized knowledge passed down through generations of bee whisperers. You just needed dead animals, and a pot, and a willingness to endure the stench. Animal fats, once rendered, could be dipped into a wick repeatedly, building up layers until you had a crude, yellowish, often misshapen candle. They were brittle in the cold, melted quickly in the heat, and burned with a significantly smokier, dimmer, and more erratic flame than beeswax. You'd have more soot on your ceiling than a dragon's chimney, and the flickering light would cast dancing shadows that could easily be mistaken for ghosts, or perhaps just a particularly lumpy sheep. But here's the kicker, the crucial pivot point in the grand illumination narrative. Tallow was abundant. Where beeswax was a luxury commodity, tied to the uncertain whims of nature and the perilous efforts of beekeepers, animal fat was a readily available byproduct of human necessity. If you ate meat, you had fat. If you had fat, you could make light. This democratic accessibility was its superpower. For the vast majority of the population, those who weren't nobles or high-ranking clergy, tallow candles represented a colossal step up from the utter darkness of night, or the barely there glow of a rushlight, which, let's be honest, was basically a reed dipped in fat and was about as illuminating as a very dim firefly. This shift wasn't a sudden, dramatic overthrow, like some greasy, fatty coup d'etat. It was a slow, creeping encroachment. Beeswax maintained its sacred status, its pure burn still coveted for religious rites and the elegant homes of the elite. But in the bustling workshops, the cramped tenements, the humble farmhouses, tallow began its smoky ascent. It was cheaper. Significantly so. You could buy 10 tallow candles for the price of 1 beeswax candle, or even less. And while the quality was undeniably inferior, for basic visibility, for seeing your soup spoon, for threading a needle, for not tripping over the family dog in the dark, tallow did the job. It was the functional, no-frills option, the utilitarian workhorse compared to beeswax's thoroughbred luxury. Historians still argue whether the sheer economic pressure of burgeoning populations, and their need for affordable domestic lighting was the primary driver for tallow's widespread adoption, or if it was simply a matter of convenience and local availability that pushed it into homes. Perhaps it was a messy combination of both, much like the burning of a tallow candle itself. The implications, of course, stretched beyond just illumination. The increased demand for animal fat spurred certain industries and agricultural practices. Farmers weren't just raising animals for meat. They were, in a sense, raising them for light. This mass production, crude as it was, started to lay the groundwork for later industrial processes. Imagine trying to explain to a medieval farmer that the fat from his pig would one day, indirectly, lead to the invention of a truly revolutionary electric bulb. You'd probably get a blank stare and an offer of some rather pungent bacon grease. So, while beeswax held its prestigious place, especially in the hallowed halls of power and piety, its market share for everyday, common illumination began to erode. It was a messy, smoky, sometimes malodorous process, but it was pragmatic. Humanity, ever resourceful, found a way to push back the encroaching night without breaking the bank, even if it meant living in a constant haze of rendered animal fat fumes. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't romantic, but it was light. And in a world still largely dictated by the rhythm of the sun, any light, even a dim, smelly one, was a precious commodity. Dawn of industrial waxes. The early stages of industrialization brought new manufacturing methods, hinting at future synthetic rivals. You're standing on the cobbled streets of an emergent industrial city, the air thick not with the familiar scent of wood smoke and horse dung, but with something new, something metallic and sharp, mingled with the faint, sweet smell of coal dust. The rhythmic clanking and hissing from behind tall brick walls tell a story of transformation, a story that will, eventually, pull the rug right out from under beeswax's velvety feet. You might have thought the humble tallow candle, remember its smoky, sputtering defiance from last time. You thought it was the biggest threat. Oh, honey, no. Tallow was just the opening act. The real show, the one that beeswax wouldn't survive, was just beginning to warm up backstage. This era, the early stages of industrialization, is a beast of its own. You see steam rising from strange contraptions, hear the grind of gears where once only the water wheel sang. The very concept of how things are made is shifting, from the artisan's skilled hand to the relentless, impersonal churn of the machine. Imagine, for a moment, trying to navigate this new world, with its strange new smells and sounds. Honestly, you probably won't survive this particular historical detour without developing a chronic cough and a newfound appreciation for silence. Early factories were less about health and safety, and more about get it done, no matter what. It's in these burgeoning industrial landscapes that the seeds of beeswax's eventual displacement are sown. Not through a sudden, dramatic invention of a new candle, but through a creeping, incremental revolution in how materials are sourced, processed, and refined. Until now, waxes were largely natural. Animal fats, insect secretions, plant exudates. But the minds of the Industrial Revolution, those insatiably curious, slightly mad scientists and tinkerers, they're looking at everything differently. They're asking, can we make it cheaper? Can we make it more consistent? Can we make it faster? You'd think the answer would be a resounding no when it came to replicating the intricate chemistry of a bee's gut. But you'd underestimate human ingenuity, especially when profit is involved. Think about the coal mines, those dark, subterranean labyrinths where men scratched out the very fuel of this new age. As coal was heated, As it yielded its energy, it also gave off byproducts: tar, gas, and a viscous, almost waxy residue. At first, it was just waste, a nuisance. But someone, somewhere, looked at that black, sticky goo and wondered, could this, in some purified form, be useful? This is where you start to see the hinting at synthetic rivals. It's not paraffin wax yet, not by a long shot. That's still decades away, hiding in the oily depths of future petroleum discoveries. No, what you're witnessing now is the very earliest, clumsy dance steps towards a manufactured world. Imagine a chemist in a soot-stained lab, perhaps with a perpetually stained apron, heating and cooling different residues, trying to coax a stable, solid substance out of something that smells suspiciously like the inside of a chimney. They're trying to separate the volatile from the solid, the useful from the utterly unuseful. It's a bit like trying to bake a cake with only half the ingredients, but having an entire industrial complex cheering you on. Or perhaps just demanding results. One mainstream historical fact to anchor us here. It was indeed during these early stages of industrialization, particularly in the mid-18th to early 19th centuries, that advancements in chemical processing and distillation began to lay the groundwork for understanding hydrocarbons. While the primary focus might have been on dyes, coal gas for lighting, or other industrial chemicals, the very methods being developed, precise heating, condensation, separation, were the same ones that would eventually be applied to petroleum to yield paraffin wax. It's less about a grand eureka moment for wax, and more about a slow, deliberate accumulation of scientific and engineering knowledge. Now for a quirky tidbit. Did you know that early attempts at chemical innovation sometimes involved things we'd find utterly bizarre today? Some alchemists, still lurking in the shadows of this new scientific age, even tried to distill the essence of various animal organs to create what they hoped would be universal solvents or even wax-like substances. You can almost smell the laboratory, a pungent mix of stale air, strange chemicals, and perhaps a faint, unsettling aroma of, well, let's just say experimental biology. Good thing those didn't catch on, or your candles might have smelled distinctly less like honey and more like something you'd find in a dusty museum exhibit labeled Failed Science. What does this mean for beeswax? Its value, though still immense, starts to be eyed with a subtle shift in perspective. Before, beeswax was simply the best. There were no true alternatives that could match its clean burn, its pleasant aroma, its malleability, or its preservation qualities. But now, with the hum of machinery and the ambition of chemists, the question arises, can we engineer something that does the job, if not perfectly, then at least affordably and in abundance? It's a quiet challenge, a whisper in the smoke-filled air, but it's there. Historians still argue whether the invention of gas lighting or the gradual development of industrial chemical processes had a more profound initial impact on the long-term demand for natural waxes. Was it the direct competition from a new form of illumination, or the underlying shift in manufacturing capabilities that truly began to erode beeswax's reign? The truth, as always, is probably a complex tapestry woven from both threads. But what is undeniable is that this era marks the beginning of the end for beeswax's undisputed dominance. You see factories rising, not just for textiles or iron, but for new ways of processing everything. And among that everything, the ingredients for a wax that didn't need a single bee were slowly, painstakingly being isolated and understood. It's not quite a wax yet, not in the form you'd recognize. But the knowledge, the methodologies, are being forged in the heat and grime of these early industrial giants. The future of illumination, preservation, and lubrication is no longer solely in the hands of the beekeeper. It's now also in the hands of the engineer and the industrial chemist. Petroleum's silent takeover. The advent of paraffin wax from crude oil delivered the decisive blow, transforming the wax industry forever. You can almost feel the grease on your fingers, a thin, almost imperceptible film clinging to the air as the world shifts around you. The soft, honeyed scent of beeswax, once so ubiquitous it was simply the smell of illumination, is slowly, almost imperceptibly being replaced. It's a scent that wasn't even a scent to the people of the time, merely the background hum of progress. But now, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint, distant thrum of industry, the chugging of new machines, and the acrid, metallic tang of something entirely alien, yet utterly revolutionary. This is the aroma of change. A change so profound it would relegate a substance once deemed more precious than gold to the shelves of specialty shops and craft fairs. You breathe it in, this new world. And if you tried to tell someone just a few decades prior that the future of light wouldn't involve a single bee, they'd have probably thought you'd suffered a blow to the head. And frankly, given the working conditions of the time, you probably wouldn't survive this if you were wrong. Remember those flickering alternatives we touched upon. The smoky tallow, the less-than-ideal spermaceti. They were mere skirmishes, minor inconveniences in the grand, luminous reign of beeswax. They chipped away at the edges, perhaps, but they never truly threatened the throne. Know that honor or dishonor, depending on your perspective, was reserved for something far more prosaic, yet infinitely more powerful: crude oil. Imagine, if you will, the earth itself, spitting forth a black, viscous liquid, seemingly useless, a nuisance, perhaps even a sign of the underworld. For centuries, it had seeped from the ground in various parts of the world, occasionally collected for medicinal purposes or as a crude sealant, but largely ignored by the march of progress, a mere geological curiosity. Then came the mid-19th century, a time of insatiable curiosity and relentless innovation, particularly in North America. People were starting to figure out this black goo, experimenting, distilling, trying to make sense of its complex molecular chaos. And then, in 1859, the drilling for oil began in earnest in Titusville, Pennsylvania, spearheaded by Edwin Drake. This isn't just some dusty historical footnote. It's the seismic shift that would literally light up a new era. Once the oil started flowing, the race was on to refine it, to break it down into its constituent parts, to unlock its potential. And amidst the kerosene, the gasoline, and the lubricating oils, a surprising byproduct emerged. A white, odorless, tasteless, and remarkably stable solid. This was paraffin wax. The initial reaction was probably a collective shrug from the beeswax industry, if they even noticed at all. What was this newfangled stuff, this petroleum derivative? But the chemists and industrialists, bless their profit-motivated hearts, saw its undeniable advantages. Unlike beeswax, which required a whole army of tiny, buzzing workers and a perilous harvest, paraffin wax was extracted from a seemingly limitless underground supply. It could be produced on an industrial scale, churning out mountains of the stuff at a fraction of the cost of its natural predecessor. Think about it. No more dealing with angry bees, no more intricate comb harvesting, no more waiting for the seasons to change. Just drill, refine, and produce. It was the ultimate fast food version of wax, ready whenever you wanted it, and a lot cheaper than the artisanal, slow-food beeswax. The impact was swift and brutal, a silent takeover that crept in like a fog. Suddenly, the candle makers, those stalwart customers of the church, of every household, found themselves with a choice. They could buy the expensive, slightly variable beeswax, with its faint honeyed scent, or they could buy this new, remarkably consistent, utterly neutral paraffin. And consistency, in an industrializing world, was king. Paraffin candles burned brighter, with less soot, and crucially, they were dirt cheap. The very factors that had made beeswax so valuable, its scarcity, the labor involved, its natural purity became its undoing in the face of this petroleum-powered juggernaut. It wasn't just about candles, either. Paraffin began to invade every niche that beeswax had once occupied. It was used for waterproofing, for polishing, for sealing. Anything beeswax could do, paraffin could do almost as well, and for a fraction of the price. You see, the market, like a fickle monarch, doesn't care about tradition or quaint charm. It cares about efficiency and cost. This transformation wasn't merely a shift in the type of wax used. It was a fundamental restructuring of an entire global industry. Beekeepers, who had once held a lucrative monopoly on a vital commodity, found their primary products' value plummeting. The focus of apiculture began to shift more intensely towards honey production, with wax becoming a secondary, less profitable byproduct. The ancient methods of wax extraction and purification, once carefully guarded secrets, became less relevant as industrial processes took over. It was like going from bespoke tailoring to fast fashion overnight. One quirky tidbit from this era is that some of the earliest paraffin wax, not perfectly refined, would have a slightly greasy feel and even a subtle petroleum-like odor, which seems almost charmingly rustic compared to the completely neutral stuff we have today. Imagine lighting a candle that smells faintly of a gas station. The sheer volume of paraffin that could be produced was mind-boggling compared to the painstaking collection of beeswax. This abundance democratized wax, making it accessible to even the poorest households. No longer was a decent source of light a luxury. This, in itself, was a powerful social change, even if it came at the cost of beeswax's commercial supremacy. Historians still argue whether the decline of beeswax's supremacy was a swift collapse, or a long, drawn-out fade, hastened, but not solely caused by paraffin, with some suggesting that cheaper alternatives had already primed the market for such a disruption. But regardless of the pace, the outcome was undeniable. The silent takeover was complete. The once golden glow of beeswax, a light that had guided civilizations, illuminated sacred rituals, and preserved history for millennia, was now largely supplanted by the cleaner, brighter, and far more economical light of paraffin, a humble derivative of crude oil. The age of beeswax as a global economic powerhouse was over, replaced by the relentless, industrial hum of the petroleum age. You drift quite peacefully now, through a space scented not with the heavy, cloying perfume of ancient rituals, nor the acrid tang of tallow lamps, but with something clean, subtle, and profoundly natural. Imagine it, a flicker of warm light, not from a petroleum-based candle spitting soot into the air, but from a pure, unadulterated beeswax pillar, its gentle glow casting dancing shadows on the wall. You pick up a small tin, its surface smooth under your fingers, and lift the lid. Inside, a balm, perhaps for your lips, perhaps a polish for an old wooden table. The scent is faint, sweet, faintly honeyed, totally unforced. This, my friend, is the quiet revolution. You see, after the long, dark ages of paraffin's reign, after petroleum's silent takeover choked the life out of beeswax's mainstream dominance, something interesting began to happen. The world, ever so slowly, began to remember what it had lost. It started with a whisper, then a murmur, and now a growing hum, much like the very insects that produce this golden miracle. Beeswax, once the king, then the forgotten peasant, is staging a comeback tour. And let me tell you, it's not for the cheap seats. You probably wouldn't survive a single night in the world before this subtle resurrection. A world perpetually dimmed, always slightly off-kilter without the innate perfection of beeswax. No synthetic could ever truly replicate its magic. For centuries, indeed for millennia, beeswax was utterly indispensable. Then, quite abruptly, the Industrial Revolution decided it had better ideas. The mainstream historical fact here is stark. The invention and subsequent mass production of paraffin wax in the mid-19th century, a byproduct of petroleum refining, was the ultimate dethroning. It was cheaper, more consistently available, and easier to scale for industrial demand. Candle factories could churn out millions of uniform units without needing to worry about the unpredictable whims of bee colonies or the perilous harvests we talked about. This shift was so profound that traditional beekeepers saw their secondary market, wax, evaporate almost overnight, forcing many to focus solely on honey production or abandon the trade entirely. But the world, as you've learned, has a funny way of circling back. We got tired of the smoke, the chemical odors, the non-renewable nature of our petroleum-derived everything. And so a yearning began, a quiet reawakening for the authentic, the sustainable, the truly natural. This is where beeswax stepped back into the limelight, not as the grand, universal commodity it once was, but as a prized ingredient in specific, high-value niche markets. Think about the products you now see proudly proclaiming, made with real beeswax. Walk into any artisan craft fair today, or browse the shelves of an organic beauty store, and you'll find it everywhere. Lip balms, lotions, and soaps cherish its emollient properties, and its ability to create a protective, breathable barrier on the skin. You remember those ancient healing and beauty rituals. They never really died. They just went underground and are now bubbling up to the surface with renewed vigor. Beeswax is hypoallergenic, non-comedogenic, meaning it won't clog pores, a miracle for anyone who's ever battled a breakout, and naturally rich in vitamin A. It's a far cry from the synthetic fillers and petroleum jellies that once dominated these industries. Then there are the candles. Oh, the candles. For centuries, they were the benchmark. After paraffin's smoky ascent, people forgot the clear, steady, virtually drip-free burn of a pure beeswax candle. Now, the eco-conscious consumer, the one who cares about indoor air quality and sustainable sourcing, is rediscovering this. They burn longer, cleaner, and emit a subtle, natural fragrance that you could never bottle. There's no soot, no release of questionable chemicals, just the comforting glow that our ancestors knew. You might even find yourself paying a surprising premium for one, a quiet echo of its gold-rivaling past. Beyond personal care and ambience, its resurgence stretches into unexpected corners. Take food wraps, for instance. Plastic cling film? So last century. Now you can find beautifully patterned beeswax-coated cloths that you warm with your hands to mold over bowls, wrap sandwiches, or preserve produce. They're reusable, washable, and completely biodegradable. A delightful, quirky tidbit in its modern application. It's a modern iteration of its ancient preservative qualities, a full-circle moment if ever there was one. You also find it in high-end wood polishes, giving antique furniture a deep, lustrous, natural sheen that synthetic sprays can never quite replicate. And in the world of fine art, encaustic painting, a technique that dates back to ancient Greece and Rome, where pigments are mixed with heated beeswax, is enjoying a vibrant renaissance among contemporary artists drawn to its unique texture and luminosity. Historians still argue whether the decline of beeswax's value was purely a technological inevitability, or if cultural shifts away from highly natural materials also played a significant role. Was it simply that paraffin was cheaper? Or did the industrial age's fascination with uniformity and mass production also push consumers away from the imperfect, natural product? It's a fascinating chicken or egg scenario. But for now, the buzz is back. This modern beeswax resurgence isn't about replacing every synthetic product on the market. It's about reclaiming its rightful place as a premium, natural, and highly effective ingredient. It's about consumers voting with their wallets for sustainability, for purity, for a connection to the natural world. It supports sustainable beekeeping practices, encouraging healthy bee populations, which, let's be honest, is probably one of the most important battles humanity is currently fighting. You look at that beeswax candle, you smell that balm, and you realize that sometimes the oldest solutions truly are the best. Let's imagine you're drifting, almost floating now, through a summer meadow. The air is warm, thick with the scent of clover and wild thyme, and you can almost feel the gentle thrum against your eardrums, the endless, industrious symphony of a million tiny wings. You sense the very breath of the planet in that hum, the quiet engine of life, tirelessly working. And as beeswax enjoys its modern renaissance, finding its way into handcrafted candles, organic balms, and eco-friendly wraps, a deeper, more pressing question hums beneath the surface of this newfound appreciation. What about the bees themselves? You see, for all our historical fascination with beeswax, for all the fortunes it amassed and the empires it lit, we rarely pause to consider the silent, often precarious existence of its producers. We treated them as little more than tiny, furry production units, their well-being secondary to our desires. But now, in an age where the very fabric of our ecosystems feels as delicate as a spiderweb catching dew at dawn, the plight of the bee has entered the global consciousness with a frantic, buzzing urgency. And here's your cheeky reality check for the evening. If these tiny, furry architects of life suddenly vanished, you probably wouldn't survive this for very long yourself. Forget your artisanal beeswax candles. You'd be too busy wondering where your food went. The environmental impact of beekeeping, surprisingly, isn't a simple equation. On one hand, managed honeybee colonies, especially Apis mellifera, are phenomenal pollinators. They boost crop yields, support biodiversity in agricultural landscapes, and essentially act as tiny, furry security guards for our food supply. Without their tireless work, your morning toast would look decidedly less exciting. A dystopian breakfast, really. This direct pollination service alone underpins roughly 1/3 of the global food supply, making beekeepers, in a strange way, custodians of humanity's larder. The honey they produce, the wax they secrete, are almost happy byproducts of a much grander ecological service. However, the picture isn't entirely golden. Modern, large-scale commercial beekeeping can, paradoxically, put pressure on wild bee populations. Imagine a bustling city park with only one small food truck. If suddenly, a dozen more, all serving the same limited menu, pulled up, things would get crowded, wouldn't they? Similarly, large numbers of managed honeybees, while beneficial for crop pollination, can sometimes outcompete native solitary bees and bumblebees for scarce nectar and pollen resources, especially in areas with limited floral diversity. This isn't always the case, and sustainable practices aim to mitigate this, but it's a nuanced discussion. Then there's the thorny issue of disease and pest transmission. Just like humans can spread a cold in a crowded office, honeybees can share pathogens and parasites. Varroa mites, for instance, are tiny, crab-like external parasites that latch onto bees, feeding on their hemolymph and transmitting viruses. These mites, originally from Asia, spread globally with the movement of European honeybees, decimating wild bee populations and weakening managed colonies alike. Beekeepers have to constantly battle these microscopic vampires, often using various treatments, some of which can, in turn, stress the bees or leave residues. It's a constant tightrope walk, but the real heavyweight champion of bee threats, the one that keeps entomologists up at night, is undoubtedly pesticides. Specifically, a class of systemic insecticides called neonicotinoids. You know, the kind absorbed by the plant, making the entire plant toxic to pests. Well, they're also toxic to bees. When bees forage on treated crops, they ingest tiny, sublethal doses that might not kill them outright but impair their navigation, memory, immune systems, and overall colony health. Imagine trying to find your way home after one too many sleep aids. That's roughly what a neonicotinoid does to a bee's brain. Many countries have restricted or banned these chemicals, but the legacy of their widespread use continues to haunt bee populations. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. A study once found trace amounts of over 100 different pesticides in pollen collected by honeybees, turning their nutritious food into a chemical cocktail. Makes you think twice about that pollen supplement, doesn't it? Habitat loss and fragmentation are also silent, creeping killers. As monoculture agriculture expands, replacing diverse wild meadows and hedgerows with vast fields of a single crop, bees lose their varied diet and crucial nesting sites. Think of it, would you want to eat only cornflakes day in and day out? Bees need a diverse menu of pollen and nectar from different flowering plants to get all the essential nutrients for a healthy colony. When their supermarket shrinks to a single aisle, their health declines, making them more susceptible to disease and pesticides. Climate change, that ubiquitous disruptor, also throws a wrench in the works. Warming temperatures can cause flowering plants to bloom earlier, meaning bees might emerge from hibernation or have their foraging instincts kick in after the peak bloom, a phenomenon known as phenological mismatch. It's like arriving at a party just as everyone is packing up. Extreme weather events, droughts, floods, late frosts, also wreak havoc on floral resources and bee survival. Historians still argue whether ancient beekeepers, with their intimate connection to nature, were more attuned to subtle environmental shifts that impacted their colonies, or if they just shrugged and accepted losses as part of the deal. The future of beeswax, then, is inextricably linked to the future of bees. The modern beeswax resurgence we discussed previously, while wonderful for natural product enthusiasts, is also a reflection of a growing consciousness about sustainability. Consumers are increasingly seeking out ethically sourced beeswax, often from local beekeepers who prioritize bee health over maximum honey or wax production. This shift encourages practices like leaving enough honey for the bees to survive the winter, minimizing chemical treatments, and planting pollinator-friendly gardens. You might even be seeing bee hotels popping up in urban areas or notices about planting native wildflowers. These aren't just feel-good gestures. They're vital efforts to provide crucial resources and nesting sites for all bee species, not just the managed ones. It's a recognition that every patch of land, no matter how small, can be a part of the solution. The tiny, persistent hum of a bee, once a background noise, is now a call to action, reminding us that the past's most valuable resource, beeswax, is entirely dependent on the future's most valuable pollinators. And so, as you feel that sleepy hum resonating deep within you, remember the delicate balance. The beeswax that once glowed in ancient cathedrals, preserved pharaohs, and waterproofed ships is a testament to the bees' enduring generosity. But that generosity is not infinite. It demands respect, understanding, and a willingness to protect the tiny, buzzing artisans who have so selflessly provided for humanity for millennia. Their future, in so many ways, is our own. Cultural echoes and lore. Delve into the enduring presence of beeswax in folklore, proverbs, and traditional crafts worldwide. You close your eyes, and for a moment you can almost feel the hum of the hive, the delicate rustle of wings, not just in the immediate present, but echoing through centuries. It's a sound that has seeped into the very bedrock of human culture, a whisper carried on the wind from ancient forests to bustling market squares. The bee, and by extension, its precious wax, isn't just a creature or a commodity. It's a character, a symbol, a teacher in the grand epic of human storytelling. You've seen how beeswax lit the darkest nights, sealed the most profound secrets, and even earned its keep as currency, but its presence stretches far beyond the tangible. It's woven into the very fabric of our collective memory, a thread so fine you might not even notice it until you truly stop to look. Consider for a moment the enduring power of a simple proverb. You hear phrases like busy as a bee and the bee's knees, and they slide off the tongue with such ease, don't they? They're so ingrained in our modern vernacular that you probably don't even pause to think about where they came from. But these aren't just catchy sayings. They are linguistic fossils, tiny amber-encased remnants of an age when the bee's industry and the purity of its wax were attributes so profoundly respected. They became metaphors for human excellence. To be busy as a bee wasn't just about work ethic. It was about purposeful, communal labor, producing something invaluable from diligent effort. And the bee's knees. Well, that one's a delightful nod to something absolutely perfect. The best of the best. Much like the exquisite, multifaceted wax that emerged from those tiny, industrious creatures. It speaks to a deep, inherent admiration for the bee's output, an understanding that something truly special came from that buzzing, intricate world. In folklore, the bee often transcends its insect form, becoming a mystical messenger, a bringer of omens, or even a tiny, winged deity. Across various cultures, especially in Eastern Europe and Slavic traditions, it was believed that bees were sacred creatures, possessing souls or even being reincarnated human spirits. You certainly wouldn't want to upset them, not just for fear of a sting, but for fear of spiritual repercussions. In some old German tales, bees were thought to be the direct messengers of God, and their presence in a house was a blessing. If the master of the house died, you absolutely had to go tell the bees, or they'd simply abandon the hive, taking their magical gifts, including, of course, their wax, with them. Imagine having to explain that concept to your modern smart home assistant. Alexa, please inform the bees of my uncle's passing, and for goodness sake, don't let them leave. You probably wouldn't survive the awkward silence that followed, let alone the existential dread of an empty hive. This reverence extended to the wax itself. In ancient Egypt, for instance, Beeswax wasn't just for sealing sarcophagi or illuminating temples. It held profound magical significance. Papyrus scrolls dating back thousands of years contain spells and rituals where beeswax figures, often molded into the likeness of deities or enemies, were central. You'd heat the wax, shape it, and then use it in a binding spell or an invocation. It was believed to have a unique capacity to hold and transmit energy, to embody the very essence of what it represented. This wasn't just a craft. It was a powerful conduit for the unseen. And think back to the ancient Greek practice of creating intricate sculptures using the lost wax casting method, a technique you can still find being perfected by artisans today. Here, beeswax wasn't merely a medium. It was the ephemeral soul of the sculpture, holding its form before gracefully melting away to allow the enduring metal to take its place. It's a beautiful metaphor for transformation and permanence, isn't it? Then there are the traditional crafts, where beeswax isn't a star, but a humble, indispensable workhorse. You see it everywhere, subtly performing its duties. In bookbinding, a thread drawn through a block of beeswax becomes stronger, less prone to tangling, and more resistant to wear and tear. Imagine trying to stitch together a hefty tome without that crucial step. Your fingers would ache, and your thread would fray into an unmanageable mess. In leatherworking, beeswax is used to finish edges, providing a smooth, protective seal that repels water and prevents unraveling. Your favorite leather boots, still holding up after years of abuse. Chances are beeswax played a silent, vital role in their longevity. Even in woodworking, that rich, satisfying sheen on antique furniture often owes its luster to a beeswax polish, gently buffed into the grain, enhancing its natural beauty while safeguarding it from dust and moisture. It's a testament to its versatility, a quiet powerhouse of preservation and enhancement. The sacred connection of beeswax also reverberates through countless religious traditions. You recall how the Church's insatiable demand fueled its medieval value, but the symbolism runs deeper. The purity of beeswax, untainted by smoke or soot when burned, made it a natural choice for religious ceremonies. It symbolized Christ's pure flesh, derived from the virgin bee, bringing light into darkness. In Orthodox Christianity, beeswax candles are still central to worship, symbolizing prayer ascending to heaven and the divine light. This isn't just a historical artifact. It's a living tradition, a continuity of belief stretching back millennia. You might find yourself in a quiet, ancient church, the air thick with the scent of burning wax, and in that moment you're breathing in history itself. There's a curious tidbit from ancient Celtic traditions, where bees were sometimes associated with the otherworld, seen as creatures that could travel between realms. Beeswax, therefore, gained an almost liminal quality, used in rituals to connect with ancestral spirits or for divination. Some stories even suggest that certain druids would carry a small piece of beeswax on their person for protection, believing it would ward off malevolent spirits or ill fortune. It's a fascinating blend of practical utility and mystical belief, demonstrating how closely interwoven the natural world was with the spiritual one. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of beeswax in European folk magic was a direct continuation of pre-Christian pagan practices or a syncretic blend influenced by early Christian symbolism. Was it the innate qualities of the wax that lent themselves to mystical interpretation, or did existing beliefs about bees simply extend to their byproducts? The line between practical application and spiritual significance often blur, especially when you're looking back through the mists of time. You can imagine a medieval villager, carefully crafting a beeswax candle not just for light, but imbued with wishes for protection, a hopeful flicker against the encroaching darkness. It wasn't just about illumination, it was about intention. And think of the enduring charm of a beeswax seal. When you see an old letter, perhaps from centuries past, sealed with a blob of crimson or black wax, impressed with a family crest or a king's insignia, it instantly evokes a sense of solemnity and importance. This wasn't just an envelope flap. It was a personal signature, a mark of authenticity and secrecy. The pliability of warm wax, setting firm to protect its contents, made it the perfect medium for a message that absolutely had to remain private until it reached its intended recipient. It's a tactile connection to a past where communication was slow, deliberate, and imbued with tangible weight. You can almost feel the anticipation of breaking that seal, the crisp snap of wax giving way to reveal secrets or pronouncements. The very act was a ritual in itself. From the quiet dignity of a church altar to the bustling workbench of a shoemaker, from the whispered charms of a folk healer to the grand declarations of royalty, beeswax has consistently held its place. It's a humble material, yes, but one imbued with a richness of meaning that far surpasses its physical form. It's a legacy that continues to resonate, even in our synthetic digital age. You find it in artisanal shops, touted for its natural, wholesome qualities, a gentle echo of its ancient prominence. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest things hold the most profound stories. You can almost feel the gentle hum of the hive, even now, can't you? Imagine the warmth emanating from those six-sided cells, the faint, sweet scent of propolis and nectar, a scent that carried through the centuries, linking us directly to the ancient world. You're standing in a quiet corner of a forgotten apiary, the sun beginning its slow descent, painting the air in hues of amber and gold. It's a peaceful scene, so serene that you probably won't survive the sheer boredom of it if you're not careful. But this humble corner, this quiet industry, holds secrets far grander than any gold vault, secrets of a substance that once commanded prices that would make a modern billionaire blush. Beeswax. We've journeyed through its glittering past, haven't we? From the illuminating beacon in the darkest night, casting its gentle, unwavering glow, to the sealant protecting pharaohs' tombs, preserving their very breath for eternity. You've seen it serve as currency, weighty and valuable, a tangible form of exchange in bustling medieval markets. You've discovered it as a healing balm, soothing ancient ailments, and as the very canvas for masterpieces, its pliancy allowing for intricate detail and vibrant color. Its story isn't just about a wax. It's a profound mirror, reflecting the ebb and flow of human ingenuity, our ceaseless needs, and our often surprising choices. Remember when we talked about it rivaling gold's luster? It wasn't about shiny aesthetics then, was it? Gold was pretty, a status symbol, an object of desire, sure. But could it waterproof your boat, allowing you to brave treacherous seas? Could it light your pilgrimage through a treacherous forest, warding off unseen dangers? Could it preserve your vital documents from the ravages of time and damp, safeguarding knowledge for generations? No, no, and still no. Beeswax, in its unassuming elegance and sheer utilitarian might, could. It was the workhorse of civilizations, the quiet hero of daily life, doing the heavy lifting while gold just sat there, looking pretty. Its decline, then, wasn't a failing of the wax itself, but a testament to humanity's relentless pursuit of efficiency, and let's be honest, cheaper alternatives. The smoky ascent of tallow, filling homes with soot and unpleasant odors, the silent, relentless takeover of paraffin. These were not battles won by the superiority of the alternative, but by sheer industrial scale, ease of production, and a significantly lower price point. It's a bit like discovering your favorite artisanal, hand-stitched leather wallet, imbued with character and history, has been replaced by a perfectly functional, mass-produced plastic one. You might mourn the craftsmanship, the story, the connection, but your pocketbook, alas, does not. It's a mainstream historical fact that prior to the 19th century, beeswax was the undisputed primary material for high-quality candles across Europe and much of the world. Especially vital in religious institutions where its clean burn, bright flame, and pleasant, subtle aroma were not merely preferred, but often mandated over the acrid smoke and foul smell of animal fat alternatives. Imagine the sheer volume of wax required for every cathedral, every monastery, every chapel, burning day and night. And here's a quirky tidbit for you, taking us back to ancient Egypt. Did you know that some advanced embalming practices involved using beeswax, not just for sealing the mummified remains, but also for subtly shaping and preserving facial features? Imagine a pharaoh, thousands of years later, still subtly smiling because some ancient artisan meticulously sculpted his lips and eyebrows with a bit of bee goodness. Talk about a permanent grin that truly stands the test of time, putting even modern Botox to shame. Historians still argue whether the sharp decline in large-scale medieval beekeeping, particularly for wax production, was solely due to the introduction and widespread adoption of cheaper lighting alternatives like tallow and later paraffin, or if it was also significantly impacted by changing agricultural practices and increased urbanization, which drastically reduced available foraging land for both wild and managed bee colonies. It's never just one thing, is it? Now, shift your gaze to the present. You find beeswax gracing your natural skincare products, nourishing your skin with its emollient properties. You discover it in your artisanal furniture polish, bringing out the gleam in cherished wood, or even in your eco-friendly food wraps, replacing single-use plastics. It's no longer competing with gold for sheer economic dominance, no longer the universal illuminator, but it's winning hearts in a completely different arena, the vibrant, growing world of sustainability, natural living, and mindful consumption. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the old ways, the natural ways, are indeed the best ways, or at least the most thoughtfully produced and environmentally kind. You've gone from fearing you might not survive the dark without a beeswax candle, to fearing you might not survive your eco-conscious friend's judgment if you don't use a beeswax wrap. Oh, how the tables, my friend, have subtly, sweetly turned. Its journey mirrors our own collective human journey. We innovate, we adapt, we often chase what's cheaper and faster, what's more scalable, sometimes at the expense of quality or natural harmony. But then, inevitably, we circle back to the wisdom of what was naturally there all along. The fundamental human need for light, for preservation, for healing, for beauty, for craft. These needs are timeless, constant. The solutions we devise, however, are fluid, ever-evolving. Beeswax simply evolved along with us, taking a quiet backseat when the synthetic age arrived, only to re-emerge not as a king, but as a cherished, natural marvel, a symbol of conscious living. It's a quiet comeback story, a testament to enduring value that transcends fleeting trends. It reminds us that true worth isn't about scarcity or shimmer, but about inherent purpose and the delicate balance of nature's gifts. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the western sky in hues of deep amber and soft lavender, The gentle, persistent hum of the unseen hive seems to grow quieter still, a sleepy, soothing lullaby echoing through the deepening twilight. The air cools, carrying with it the subtle, earthy sense of the evening, a comforting, familiar embrace that settles gently around you, inviting you to release the day's hold. Think now, simply and softly, of the journey we've taken tonight, tracing the golden thread of beeswax through millennia, from the bustling, vibrant markets of antiquity to the quiet, mindful choices of today. It has been a story not just of a substance, but of light, of preservation, of healing, and of human hands working in intricate, often perilous, harmony with nature's most industrious architects. Allow your thoughts to drift, to soften, like the warm, pliable wax itself, yielding effortlessly to the gentle, unhurried pressure of a quiet, encroaching night. There's a profound, almost mystical peace in understanding how something so small, so seemingly insignificant as a bee's pure secretion, could hold such immense power and purpose across the vast, undulating expanse of human history. It reminds us, perhaps, that true value isn't always found in glittering vaults or booming, loud industries, but often in the unassuming, the natural, the truly, quietly useful. Feel the last vestiges of the day's concerns melt away from your shoulders, just as ancient impurities were painstakingly rendered from raw wax, leaving behind only the purest, most refined essence. Let the faint, sweet memory of beeswax, a memory woven from ancient glows and whispered stories, cradle you now. The world outside, with its grand histories and pressing realities, its urgent demands and bustling noise, can serenely wait until morning. For now, simply rest, knowing that even in the tiniest of wonders, in the most humble of natural gifts, there is a whole universe of stories waiting to unfold, ready to lull you into a deep, peaceful slumber. The whispers of the past are here to guard your dreams, a soft, comforting presence in the quiet dark. Sweet dreams,